The regular meeting of the Committee on Ordinance for November 10th. We're beginning at 6:34 p.m. The members present are myself, I'm the chair, Rebecca Lisi, City Councilor at Large. We have Linda Vacan from Ward 5, Terry Murphy from Ward 2, Juan Anderson Burgos is our vice chair from Ward 6, and Libby Hernandez from Ward 4. Welcome, everyone. We have a number of items on the agenda. Because the hen ordinance is going to be a bit more involved, I thought we might put that off and take up the traffic orders out of order, since Bob has prepared a write-up for all of those orders.
Make a motion, we suspend the rules and take up item 2 to start with.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for that. The motion has been made and seconded to proceed out of order, suspending the rules. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so moved. And then item number 2 is filed by Councilor Bartley, that DPW install a crosswalk in front of Blessed Sacrament School located at 21 Westfield Road. This is per the request of the school administration, brought to its attention by MSP and HPD, which I believe is the Massachusetts State Police and the Holyoke Police Department. So Bob, I know you have your write-up. Do you want to walk us through your comments?
Certainly, and this time around, I didn't do as extensive a write-up as I typically do. In part, and if it's okay with the committee, Mike McManus and myself teaming up on 4 orders today. I'll be dealing with order number 2 and order number 5, and I'll ask Mike to step in on order number 3 and order number 4.
Great, thanks. Yep, and thanks, Mike, for taking care of those items.
So order number 2, I understand what the concern is. There's obviously a lot of students that cross Westfield Road. Westfield Road is a very busy road. I did meet with Paula Fitzgerald last week, the principal, on Friday, and I met with her again today after consulting with a former alumni of Blessed Sacrament, which is in attendance, Mike McManus. So Mike filled me in on some of his own personal experiences at Blessed Sacrament. And I think we've come up with a plan that makes some sense. As the committee members may have heard in the past, there's always a concern anytime the city puts in what's known as a mid-block crosswalk, which is a crosswalk that's not at an intersection, because it in many cases is a crosswalk that drivers aren't prepared for. So you have to pay extra attention in terms of marking them, putting up signage, and in some cases putting up rapid flashing beacons to try to make the crosswalk as safe as possible. So in talking with Mike and talking with Paula, we believe that the location that we've arrived at would be next to, but not within, the driveway on the west side of the property. That's where most of the students that are walking in from the west side of Holyoke are coming towards the school. And you know what people tend to do is they pick the shortest path. Paula and I had originally talked about a crosswalk location at the center of the school building itself at the main entrance. The problem is nobody really gets to the school immediately at the main entrance. What they do is they typically cross in advance of the main entrance. So we're trying to come up with a location that would be used if we moved forward with that location. And at this point, in consultation with the school today, we believe a location, if I have my compass directions correct, would be on the west side, fire hydrant just past the driveway, and we'd be able to put in curb ramps, mark the crosswalk, and put in signage that would be seen at that location. What Mike and I talked about was trying to do this on a trial basis, in part because we're getting close to the end of the construction season, and coming in and cutting in the curb ramps and building the sidewalk modifications realistically would not be happening this fall. So what we talked about would be going ahead with striping of the sidewalk and putting up signage, and signage actually on both the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the street. So it really catches the driver's attention coming from both directions. And then really on a trial basis, seeing if that's working for the school and working for the students and they actually start to use it. Because before we put any real money into building curb ramps and possibly, sometime in the future, possibly putting up a rapid flashing beacon, we'd want to make certain we're putting it at a location that is going to be used and that there'll be a benefit to that investment by the city. So I had some conversation with Paula today, and that's really our game plan right now, is on a trial basis, painting the crosswalk out. If the location doesn't end up working, we can always black out the paint, putting up signage in both directions, high visibility signage in both directions. And again, if the signage doesn't work at that location, we can always take the signage out very easily and relocate it. But before we make the more extensive modifications and to make the crossing ADA compliant, which we need to make all of our crossings ADA compliant, we want to make certain that we have the right location.
Right, that sounds great. I see that Councilor Bartley has joined us from the waiting room. We have proceeded out of order, Councilor Bartley, and took up item number 2 first, which you filed. And in case you didn't catch the whole synopsis, Mr. Parent and Mr. McManus have met with the principal at Blessed Sacrament, and they're suggesting a crosswalk west of the fire hydrant. And before we actually go ahead with cutting curb ramps, it seems that there will be some painting done and some signage put in place on a trial basis to see how it fits that location before going ahead and cutting into the curb, given that we're at the end of the construction year anyhow. So do you want to comment on that at all, since it is your order?
Sounds like a good summary to me. If the principal's happy and everybody's happy, I'm happy.
Great. Okay. I see Councilor McGivern. Councilor McGivern wants to comment.
Thank you, Councilor Lisi. And anything we can do for an elementary school with elementary school age children, I think, is important on a very busy street. But Bob, can you tell me where this fire hydrant is? You say west of the fire parking lot?
As you look at Blessed Sacrament, you have the church that's on the Northampton side of the property. You then have a parking lot, you have the school building, and then you have a parking lot that's beyond the school building.
Yep.
And there's a driveway to exit that parking lot. The crosswalk would be outside of the driveway because you don't want to have pedestrians conflicting with cars. But there's a fire hydrant just to the left of that existing driveway, and we'd be putting our crosswalk probably to the right of that fire hydrant. So as you're heading westerly on Westfield Road, it's the second second driveway for Blessed Sacrament.
And that would be 2 houses before Merrick Ave?
I believe so, yes.
Does Merrick Ave have a crosswalk?
It does not in crossing Westfield Road. It crosses, I believe there is one that crosses Merrick, but there isn't one that crosses that T intersection itself.
And lights would go up for this crosswalk?
I didn't hear that question.
You said pedestrian lights to stop people were going to go up?
We would recommend that. We obviously need to come up with the funding for that. The rapid flashing beacons are typically installed, are $10,000+ item, and then with the curb cuts and sidewalk work, by the time it's all said and done, we could be spending $15,000 or $20,000 in this crossing to make it really what is an appropriate, safe crossing. A location, which is important. If you're going to put a mid-block crosswalk, really go. Or not overboard. You need to really put in a high level of signage and protections because now you need to tell drivers to expect something that they don't normally expect.
I agree. And I think safety comes first. And I think even an elevated crosswalk wouldn't be a bad idea to slow down some people. But how long is it going to be? How long is it going to be temporary?
We would through the winter time, and in the springtime, I think the first thing that we could do is we could work on the sidewalks and the curb ramps, and then we could see if we could locate funding through perhaps another budget and some similar to what we've received council approval for in the past to be able to either transfer out of or expand the scope of an existing appropriation to cover this. Mike and I haven't gone through that exercise right now to see where there might be funds available within an existing appropriation, but that would be our first step.
Now,
And we'll get the paintings in place and the signage in place.
crosswalks need an ordinance. Or it'd be really unsafe because then you can't enforce it. Crosswalks that are not at the intersection require an ordinance.
It's true. Perhaps we need to pass the ordinance and then monitor. But we do have two other counselors in queue to comment. Counselor McGivern, are you
Well,
on?
I just want to finish my thoughts because I think it's important for safety of children and safety of parents. Is, you know, if we have to adopt an ordinance, we need to adopt it either full or explain to us how you adopt something temporary. And that means put up some pedestrian lights to really stop drivers and allow people to cross safely. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Bacon and then Counselor Murphy.
So my comment is, if we put it into ordinance form and we don't have the funding to construct it, it will be on paper, but it will never actually happen. And so I'm wondering if we could find a legal path to try what the engineer is recommending, which is that trial period, short of creating an ordinance. But I think we might need to get some legal advice relative to whether that's acceptable or we're creating more liability by doing something like that. But I like the idea of trying it because sometimes you find out it's not working and you wouldn't want to spend the $15,000 or $20,000 on the crosswalk that people wouldn't use. So I like the concept. I just think we need to figure out the path to try to implement it.
Thank you. I think we should ask the legal counsel to perhaps suggest some ideas for how we might do the temporary basis. But first, let's hear from Counselor Murphy. Crystal, just a heads up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, first of all, I agree with Councilor McGivern in this case that, you know, I think it's important that we do something and we establish that we're going to have a crosswalk there. And I think everyone's in agreement that there's enough children there that potentially it can be a danger. I also think where it's been suggested makes a lot of sense because those people coming from Northampton Street, if it were in the first parking lot, would probably not be thinking there's going to be a crosswalk there. And I think where it's been suggested leaves traffic going in both directions with a much better opportunity to see that there is a pedestrian crosswalk there. I would just suggest that we do pass an ordinance. If for some, and I guess after last night and tonight, I like to spend a lot of money, but you know, we're talking the safety of kids here. I mean, if we know and fully expect that this is going to make it safer for those kids, then if it's 10,000, 15,000, we need to find that way to be able to do that. And I know we've got money somewhere that we can do things with, but I do think we need to pass an ordinance like Councilman McGivern says. We make the commitment. If for some reason we decide down the path that this is not the way to go, then we can always amend the ordinance. But at least if we do this, kind of as Councilman McGivern says, we will have some legal authority with the ordinance, with the crosswalk. So, I mean, again, I think the suggestion makes a lot of sense to me. The economics is minimal when you're talking about saving a kid's life. And I hope that we do pass the ordinance and that in the spring we get everything put together and have a very safe crosswalk. Thank you.
So I just heard there's actually two different paths that we can travel with this. One is passing the ordinance and make it effective immediately. And given that, again, we're at the end of the construction season, we may not be able to get all the curb ramps and cuts in place. Lighting, I don't think we would have it at this moment in time, or maybe we could pass something and say it's effective for the spring and you know, just be ready in the spring to sort of construct this. But that means that we're going the winter without that crosswalk. Crystal, I think we need some guidance from you to see if there is a way that we could do.
Madam Chair?
Yes?
I'm not sure if you saw my hand up.
Oh, I didn't. I'm sorry. I'm looking for the blue
No,
hand.
it's fine. I'm looking for.
Madam Chair, I've been asking for some input too, please.
Okay, sure.
Councilor Greeny.
Councilor Anderson Burgos and then Councilor Greeny. I'll hear from you before we go to legal counsel.
Okay, perfect. So I think, obviously, Blessed Sacrament, we need to address that immediately. These are children's lives we're talking about. But just last night, I was speaking to one of my constituents that lives on Northampton Street, same street. And it was sad to hear him cry because his dog was killed. And the person didn't have the common decency to stop, to pull over, hit his dog, and continued speeding down Northampton Street. The whole street it seems to me, has become an issue with speeding, the whole entire street. So I don't want to, we need to address this immediately, especially, these are children. So we need to speed this up. This is not something that we gamble with. These are lives that we're talking about, people who pay their taxes, people who want to see their children graduate from high school and college and get married and have families of their own. So these are the things, this is why we're here. So yeah, whatever we got to do to get this done.
Councilor Greenie.
Yeah, just quickly, if it's a temporary fix, if it's a temporary situation to put in this crosswalk, why would we need an ordinance? It's temporary. We need an ordinance to make it permanent, I would think. Just a question for Crystal or anybody that can answer it. It's temporary, so why would we need an ordinance?
Well, I think the point that Councilor McGivern is making is that if we don't have an ordinance, we open ourselves up to legal trouble. With the enforcement, and then also if there were ever an accident there, we wouldn't have the legal coverage. That being said, I believe I heard Bob say that he wants to somewhat explore whether this location would work. And so to put the painting, signage, and, very intensive lighting that would be suitable, for that crosswalk, it's very cost intensive when we don't know yet if we're going to settle on that spot. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Parent.
That is correct. The most expensive thing would be modifying the curbs and putting in curb ramps and putting in the lighting. Up to that point, the painting, the signs can be readily blacked out, can be readily relocated. And the expense, there's some expense, but a very moderate expense.
Councilor Leahy, are you there raising your hand?
Yeah, good evening, everyone.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah, I've been following you guys. You guys all make some excellent points. And I kind of want to go along the lines of what Councilor McGivern was saying. The fact that, we're discussing this now. I'm not saying we're not going to do anything, but if we didn't do anything, God forbid something did happen, any good attorney would go back to this meeting and hear all of our discussions. And quite frankly, I think this opens up to some liability. Crystal, what's our exposure now? I mean, what do you recommend us doing?
Under suspension of the rules, Crystal, Attorney Barnes.
So it's tough to say. I mean, somebody stepping into the street and getting hit by a car isn't necessarily a city liability. Some of it is contributory negligence. I mean, you look both ways. You make sure a car isn't coming before you enter the street. Same with, just because you're on city streets doesn't necessarily mean the city is responsible for every action you make. I certainly agree that, there's some safety issues here. I'm a little unsure why we would simply do a temporary crosswalk. Why not make it an ordinance? It's a simple meeting back and forth. If you're already going to take the steps to put down indicators for a crosswalk, why not just put the language in? I mean, I feel like our ordinances here are so simple. I mean, they go to council, they go to ordinance, they get drafted, they go back to council. So if we ever need to remove it or move the location, I feel like it's a simple swap. I would definitely want to work with Bob Parent on location, making sure that it makes the most sense. Anytime we do traffic rerouting or traffic adjustments, I always seek his guidance just because there's a lot that goes into that. You don't want to put a crosswalk where people aren't going to see it and are going to be slamming on their brakes. Now you're causing accidents on top of people possibly getting hit in the street. So we want to make sure it's at the most opportune location, that it's not backing up traffic should people need to stop. We want to make sure it's following guidelines if it needs, lighted indicators, et cetera. So, you know, right now with nothing in the street, I don't want to say our liability is nothing, but there's certainly an argument to be made that if, you know, people are crossing the street and getting hit by cars, it's not necessarily a city responsibility. Here where there's children, you know, you run into a little bit more liability that you want to make safe pathways for them to get where they need to go around the school. So my, you know, opinion, you know, legal or not, I'm just confused how you do a temporary crosswalk. I would think just due to the ease of changing that language, I would either go, you know, not necessarily all in, you have to paint it and put up lights and everything like that, but certainly, you know, put some indicator down and throw an ordinance. And if it needs to be taken back, it's not a difficult process.
Okay, you know, that's what I was thinking, but I just wanted to throw that out there. I also drove by Smith College tonight, and boy, do they have some wonderful crosswalks. And I'm sure that they're extremely expensive, but when somebody pushes the button and it all lights up, it just, it really catches the eye. All right, thank you.
Yeah. So it looks like we're going to be heading in the direction of passing an ordinance this evening. I think that with passing the ordinance, we should expect that painting is happening, and you know, painting immediately, and then some indicator. I know that there have been
Signage.
Yeah, signage, right? So painting, signage, and do we have like a mid-road indicator? Like I know I've seen them before, where you would put like a barrel or some sort of thin cone that has the crosswalk signal there, or like a sign, like a mid-street sign.
I did speak with Paula, and what she indicated that the school would be willing to pick up those signs because they would maintain them. They would put it in the street at the beginning of the day. They would take it out of the street at the end of the day.
Okay, great.
Make the committee aware is that school staff are currently basically doing what you would do as if there was a crosswalk there. They're standing in the street right now, guiding students across the street. And if because of the concerns regarding the safety of their staff and the safety of the students that they've made this request.
Great. Painting, signage, the mid-street signage is going to be taken care of by the school. And then lighting in the spring. I think that's sort of the best we could do at this point in time. I see Councilor McGivern and Councilor Bartley. I'll have Councilor Bartley speak first, if you don't mind, as the maker of the order, and then come back to you, Councilor McGivern.
His hand was up first.
I think this is a great discussion. I appreciate everybody's input. I think it makes a lot of sense. It sounds like this is going to be an ordinance, so it's going to be in law, and that's for legal purposes. And then for financial purposes, I like the thinking of the discussion tonight and the professionals saying, well, let's observe and monitor all this, and if we need to change it, then as the law department said, we'll just file another order and we'll have another committee meeting and we'll adjust it accordingly. In fact, we probably won't even need to do that. Okay, just file the order and get the legal measurements for a city council meeting and get it done right on the floor. So I think it makes a lot of sense. The parish, the parochial administration seems really on board, and they want to help out. I know that they're gonna, just like they do across the street from my office at Metcalf, they take the signs in, put them out in the morning, take them in the afternoon, and they're very dedicated and observant to all that, and it makes a big difference, Madam Chair. It does, because motorists do see those signs, as you pointed out, in the middle of the crosswalk with the cone and the little sign with a $100 fine, and it really slows things down, and they're a lot more observant and conscientious. And then having the staff here at Metcalf pick them up. I know they have the same staff at Blessed Sacrament, and they will do a great job. So I really appreciate the discussion and everybody's pitching in, because it seems like this is going to be a real benefit for the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor McGivern.
Just real quick, I agree with Councilor Bartley. I think we're going in the right direction. The one thing I would suggest, though, is a crosswalk is 24/7. So yeah, the stuff for the daytime and when the students are using it can be brought in, but we need something that stays there 24/7 on the side of the road. that tells the cars coming during the weekends and during other hours of the day that there's a crosswalk there because someone could be using it.
Yes, absolutely. The signage on the sides will, I understood that those would be there. However, I think we would
That's a good point, Joe.
hold off on the curb ramps and the lighting for the spring. So Councilor Baker, you may want to file an order for the spring to check in on those two aspects.
Yep.
Okay.
Councilor Graney, are you trying to speak?
No. I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so then is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we adopt an ordinance creating the crosswalk with the understanding that it'll be painted lines, there'll be signage in the very near, right after the ordinance passes, hopefully within a few days, and that we would expect in the springtime that we will end up with the crosswalk signals and any other lighting that's necessary or electronic. And if need be, we come back. But I think that's the way we should put it right now.
Great, thank you. Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's a 5-0 vote. Thank you. It seems like we could take up 3 and 4 as a package. They're both 4-way stops filed by Councilor Bartley.
I'll make a motion to take up items 3 and 4 as a package.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to suspend the necessary rules and take up 3 and 4 as a package. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So move. So item 3 is that the City of Holyoke install a 4-way stop sign at Michigan and Erie Avenues. Speeding is a major problem. And also that we consider a 4-way stop installed at the intersection of Hitchcock and Martin Streets. Under discussion, if you want to hear from Bob first, or do you want to speak, Councilor?
Bob, yeah.
Oh, it's actually Mike that's taking over on these two.
Or Mike, yeah.
Mike, you have the floor.
Okay, so for Hitchcock and Martin, we've just started the engineering analysis of that intersection. We put a traffic counter out last week, and that shows us cars going through the intersection as well as turning movements in the intersection. The federal highway has a number of warrant conditions that need to be met before they recommend installing a 4-way stop. So we need to go through that exercise to see if those warrant conditions are met. And we've also set up our speed counter on Hitchcock. We did it back in 2016, but I want to do it again to if there's been any changes in speed down the road. And we're also trying to get the crash data for this intersection from the police department because that's a factor that goes into the warrant analysis. Really, the 4-way stops aren't recommended unless you have equal volumes of traffic going through the intersection. There's crashes that are caused like T-boning that a stop sign could help prevent. And then there's a couple other sight distance issues. So we need to go through that exercise to see if a 4-way stop would be warranted. 2-way stops, there's a lot less warrant conditions that need to be met. And 2-way stops, it's pretty much where you have a known through street, and then the side street is would be the street that gets the stop to control traffic and prevent accidents. So for that order, I'd requested another few weeks for us to get through our research.
Okay. Councilor Bartley, do you have any questions as the maker?
Not really. Thank you. I heard Mike, are you still doing the same thing for Michigan and Erie? Is that what
Yeah.
I heard you say?
Yeah, Michigan and Erie were further along on the analysis. So I can speak to Michigan and Erie more detail tonight. We've done the same thing. We've had the traffic counter out there, looking at volumes and movements, and what we've seen is for the most part, Michigan Avenue, which runs north-south, would be considered the through street, and Erie would be the side street. There's more, the traffic volume on Michigan is higher. Roughly, we had about 400 cars in total on Michigan Ave for one day during our study period. On Erie, we had 300 cars for the 12-hour study period. Majority of the traffic, I'd say like 75% for each on Michigan and Erie. On Michigan, it's cars traveling north, coming up the hill, and then they take a left onto Erie Ave. And for Erie Ave, the predominant movement is cars traveling to the east and then taking a right onto Michigan Ave. Looking at the warrant conditions, it's not met for vehicle volume. So the Federal Highway Association, they look for on the major street an average of 300 vehicles per hour for any 8-hour period, and on the through street or the side street, they look for 200 vehicles per hour during the same 8-hour period. Now, and it's more that the four-way stop is used as a traffic regulation device and not a speed control device. So if you have an intersection that's a high volume intersection with equal number of vehicles, you'd put a four-way stop in to try to regulate flow through the intersection. Otherwise, where you have people with the stop, their activity might tend to be more risky in order to, advance their movement and continue driving. Four-way stops the recommendation is not to use four-way stops as a speed control. There's several studies that have found that when you put in a four-way stop, that it doesn't necessarily slow traffic down on the mid-block portion, and what you see is more speeding on that mid-block portion. And when we had our video out there looking at this intersection, what we saw was a lot of rolling through the stop sign on Erie when people were taking that left or that right onto Michigan. So we wouldn't recommend putting a four-way stop in order to reduce speeding. We did have our speed counter out there, and what we were seeing is that 85th percentile for the speed was in the low 30s for the most part. There was a lot of 31s, 32s, 33s. We now have the citywide speed limit of 25 miles per hour for residential areas. So people are, traveling 7 to 8 miles per hour above that 25 mile per hour limit. What we would recommend is putting in speed humps as a next step here to see if that's effective at reducing speed.
Okay. Counselor Bartley, do you want to comment on this again as the maker? It seems that this four-way stop sign is going to either be complied with or denied, and that there's a new recommendation.
Well, right, yeah. So what you would usually do is either vote to, when I was doing this, is to approve or deny the recommendation. So that's usually what you're doing. So, you know, generally we'll support the recommendation of the, I do anyway, I support the recommendation of the city engineer and the superintendent of DPW. I guess that was my question for him at this point. If you're recommending speed humps, have we, because I have probably done this numerous times on the temporary speed humps, Mike, where are they? And I don't think you'd put them up now, if I remember right. It would be more for the spring, but
it would be more in the spring, just because we have had one snowfall so far this year, and we could get more snow anytime now.
Yeah. So is that something that we could anticipate seeing that installed in the spring, or is that hard to say?
No, I could see us putting the temporary speed humps on Michigan Ave in the springtime. Okay. And in looking at the the layout of Michigan, I think you could put 2 speed humps in between Erie and Superior Ave, because
right.
With the speed humps, even if you only put one in, it's not going to be an effective speed reducer. You need to have multiple speed humps.
Right. So I guess that's something that we'd have to go talk to the neighbors at some point and kind of show them where you'd want to do that. I know they'd be enthusiastic about, whether it's stop signs or whether it's speed humps, temporary or permanent. They'd be enthusiastic. Certainly around the residents right around that intersection that's laid out in the order. So, well, I take it they'd probably be disappointed in this result. I mean, hey, it is what it is. But we've got to make an argument for the speed humps, and I think they would actually prefer that, frankly, from what I gather. So,
we also looked at speed on Michigan on the upper part and between Downing Ave and Erie. And we found that the speed in that section was around 28, 29 for that 85th percentile. So that would suggest that speeding is not an issue on the upper part of Michigan Ave, that it's more on the lower part.
Yeah, that actually kind of rings true to me. So at any rate, okay, well, we'll work with you on that, Mike, and we'll figure out how to make that happen for the spring. In the meantime, maybe we could go out there and we could figure out the suggested locations for the speed humps, and that might make a difference in getting the petition going.
Thank you. Let's see. We have Councilor McGivern and then Councilor Murphy and Bacon.
Thank you, Councilor Lisi, and Michael. Thank you. First of all, to my Ward 3 City Councilor, I appreciate this order because this is a scary intersection. I think most of you know I live on Downing Ave, so I occasionally do come down Michigan at about 27 miles per hour with my foot on the brake. That's how steep the hill is. Mike, I think you summed it up perfect in terms of speed, in terms of traffic and counts. What we know, and I'm not, saying something that isn't well known, is that this is not just a neighborhood problem. This is a cut through from the college problem and a cut through for other reasons from Homestead Ave to the lower part of Westfield Road by Schermerhorn's. That volume of traffic speaks of not neighborhood traffic, but of that type of a situation. I like the idea of speed humps, and I think I agree with you that 2 below Erie might be more effective, but I leave that to the experts. Speed, besides the problem of speed, is I think what you said is equally important, but I'll add something to it. It's that rolling car coming through Erie Ave both from the west and the east. I've literally, when I come down Michigan, or, this happens up on Ontario and Huron when it hits Erie, cars don't even look to their left as to what's coming down. There are two visibility issues. When you're coming into Michigan on Erie, you cannot see 2 car lengths up Michigan without pulling out a little bit and carefully looking. There's a tree, there's a high fence, and there's cars parked on the road. And I know some people I've come to a stop when I see them just come to it, not, having no faith that they're going to stop. And I've seen people literally just take that right-hand turn, not fast, but take it without looking. And that's one of the scarier parts. The other part, coming the opposite way on Erie, it's a hill, and the houses, the way their lawns are, actually, it's more like a hilly front lawn. Cars can actually sneak under the radar and not be seen till they get to the intersection. So any help you can get, and I think, I'm kidding around, but I thank David, because I know the neighbors right there, and I know the neighbors that live around me are always concerned about Michigan, the amount of traffic, the speed, but especially about the intersection and the way people abuse those stop signs. So whatever we can do, the neighborhood would greatly appreciate it. And David, whatever I can do to help you with a neighborhood meeting, I'd be glad to be there.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks. So Councilor Murphy.
Thank you. Mike, and this kind of goes to what Councilor McGivern just talked about. So when we did this survey and there was 400 cars on Michigan and 300 on Erie, was the college in session? I mean, was this done?
It was done last week.
What, last week?
Oh.
So really, we haven't really impacted what happens with the college then, since obviously there's nobody going to class. So I would wonder, I mean, I'm not against the speed humps by any means, but I would just wonder in terms of whether or not it qualifies for stop signs. If we were to do this, and obviously the speed humps make sense for now, but if we did another survey when college gets back, to see what those numbers are like then. Because I agree with Councilor, I mean, having worked at the college all those years, I took that road both up and out many a time.
You were one of those cut-through people, huh?
I wasn't cutting through, I was driving carefully through.
Yeah, I hear what you talk about on Main Street by your house.
Yeah.
Joe, we're talking way back though. They had carriages and stuff, they had horses, I think, right?
Well, we didn't have horses by then. We were still working on donkeys.
Mike, do you want to respond to that at all in terms of the traffic count and how it might differ when school's in session?
So I agree with Councilor Murphy that traffic would be higher when school is in session. I have doubts that it would get to the point where there's a total of 500 cars per hour going through the intersection. Okay. But my thought was to redo the traffic count experiment when school is in session, just to verify.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilor Bacon.
So I would like to make a motion that we adopt the recommendations of our engineer, and that we will cause the temporary speed humps to be placed on Michigan Avenue in the spring.
Second.
Sure. So I think what we're doing for number 4 then is accepting the engineer's report that the 4-way stop sign be denied and that we explore temporary speed humps in the spring.
On number 3.
For number 3.
Oh, I'm sorry. I went backwards. Yes, number 3. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, so moved. And then on item number 4, we're just tabling.
I'd make a motion to table.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to table item number 4. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. Okay, thanks for that. We are up to number 5, and Bob is back in the room for us. Item number 5 is filed by Councilor Murphy, that I know parking on easterly side of Main Street from the G&E pole number 95 to a point 60 feet farther north. No parking between signs. I'll entertain a motion to take this up for discussion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We'll turn it over to Mr. Parent, and then over to Councilor Murphy as the maker.
Sure, I will get it started, and I'm certain that Councilor Murphy will explain a little bit more of the background and what caused him to have the concern to start with. So the language you see in the order is language that Councilor Murphy and myself drafted. We did that based on a site visit that we conducted now probably 2 months ago or so at this point. The concern is, if you're familiar with Main Street just south of Day Avenue, where Main Street curve, there's a curve. There is a commercial property, Renee Cody, where Renee Cody has their shop, and it's very difficult because of the curve in the roadway, and because the vehicles that are parked really at the apex of the curve to be able to safely pull out of that driveway. So the intent of this order would be to eliminate just a couple of parking spaces so that the vehicles could safely exit that parking lot and get onto Main Street.
Okay. Councilor Murphy, do you want to add to that?
Very well explained, and it was a concern from Renee Cody, and we went there. I went there, and then I asked Bob to come and meet me there. And as it is now, if there are cars parked there, you are coming out basically blind. And with this, we expect you'll have at least some vision of the cars coming northerly on Main Street, and at least be a much safer situation. So I appreciate Bob taking the time with me and meeting with the Cody and seeing their concerns. And I think I would just suggest that we adopt the ordinance as recommended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to adopt the engineer's report. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll take that as a 5-0. Okay.
Thanks,
Okay.
Bob.
So I think that we can move ahead to item number 1. Is there?
I'll make a motion to take up item number 1.
Second.
I just want to make sure that we're doing the ordinance piece for the crosswalks correctly, because I'm wondering if crosswalks are by ordinance.
I have my hand.
Okay, thanks, Crystal.
I confer with Bob a little bit when we try and get together to do the language almost as soon as possible as you guys are passing these things. And so we were digging in the ordinances. We don't keep ordinances for crosswalks. What we do have is essentially an ordinance that requires people to abide by crosswalks. So what happens is, essentially you all bring about an area that needs to be painted, we paint it, and then section 86 has part 292, which requires people to use them. So that's our legal ramifications there, that, instead of just crossing the street wherever people please, that if there's a crosswalk within a certain distance, they need to actually use it and stay within the markings. So there won't be any legal language specific for the crosswalk. It will simply get painted as you all have wished, and if it needs to be moved, it'll get unpainted and repainted. But we don't keep track of where the crosswalks are, apparently.
So I'll make a motion, we reconsider item 2, since we don't need an ordinance, but that if we reconsider, I'll make a motion to reconsider.
Motion has been made and seconded to reconsider item number 2. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then I would just make a recommendation that we get the actions that we are asking for without necessarily having an ordinance.
Right, so we move forward on painting and signage.
Correct.
And follow up with curb ramps and lighting in the spring.
Correct.
Councilor
Madam
Bartley?
Chair?
Sure. Councilor Graney, I'll have you speak after the maker of the order, Councilor Bartley.
Okay, how we want to, okay, I'm just gonna say, all I know from my record experience on this, usually we just say we're gonna put it into, take the measurements, put into legal form. That's generally how we kind of draw up crosswalk language coming before City Council. So normally the motion is to have the law department or have the engineer put it, you take the measurements and then have the law department put it into legal form, and then maybe Crystal can correct me, but that's my 7 years on the Ordinance Committee. That was the experience I had, and then I think the added, so that would be part A, and then an additional motion might be, or an amended motion might be to have the city engineer review the effectiveness of the crosswalk come this spring. So that would be my suggestion. But I would defer to Crystal if she thinks that could be more artful. Thank you.
You know, if we do put in crosswalks, are there actual measurements somewhere? Do we have that documented somewhere? Either we lost Bob. I'm looking.
Yeah, he left.
Okay, so but Crystal did speak with Bob before he left here, right? Crystal?
Right, I did. So if it exists, we do have a schedule for pedestrian ways, but I mean, it's only 6 long. I don't think that's crosswalks. I think that's more or less streets where vehicles aren't supposed to be, where people, you know, they don't want actual vehicular traffic. To our quick search, we do not see where we keep a schedule of crosswalks. So where we would normally put it into legal form, we don't have a spot where we would put it.
Crystal, I found one that was in the traffic signs, but it was for Kirtland School. And we don't have Kirtland School anymore. So it's a very old ordinance.
Mm-hmm. So just the order to create the paintings and signage should be sufficient.
I mean, if we find something between now and, you know, Friday afternoon, we can write something up, but we don't see where we're keeping track of crosswalks. There's hundreds, so it would be a huge list, and they don't exist in the ordinances.
Would be a big list.
All right, Councilor Green,
So, Madam Chair?
waiting patiently to speak.
Madam Chair, yes. Did you call on me?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
So just to clarify, then apparently I was correct in that we don't need an ordinance to take this action, but we can take this action and then create the ordinance afterwards?
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, Crystal's saying we don't even need an ordinance altogether for creating crosswalks. So
thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Councilor McGivern has his hand up. I believe it's on this item.
If I could, the only time you need an ordinance for a crosswalk, when they're at the intersection, they're automatically part of the intersection. State law allows you to have an ordinance and put crosswalks in accordingly to the intersection the way 2 streets or 1.5 streets meet. When you need an ordinance is when you do it in the middle between 2 streets where it's not an intersection. And that's not just, we've been doing that for years, but that's defined by state law.
So could we have Crystal check that? She's obviously going to check it for Friday, and then if that's the case, we'll look to have an ordinance in front of us on Tuesday.
Right. So let's say instead of saying we're adopting or an ordinance, why don't we just say put it into legal form? And so if we don't need a legal form, we will have no legal form for our meeting on Tuesday. And if it needs a legal form, we'll have that in the jacket for the president when he's going through the orders.
There you go.
Okay. So on the motion then that we put the crosswalk painting and signage into legal form, and then expect that curb ramps, lighting, and a review of the engineer happens in the spring. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Okay. Back up to regular order then. We have item number 1 filed by Lisi Hernandez, that in an effort to enhance food access and security for our residents during these uncertain times, that we expedite a backyard chicken ordinance as well as review of the permitting process for community gardens to ensure that it facilitates easy access and use of such sites. All in favor of having this up for discussion?
Aye.
Okay.
So moved. I'm going to pull up this other document here. For this discussion, I see we do have our Board of Health Director, Sean Gonsalves, our Animal Control Officer, Eric Velez, as well as Crystal Barnes, our legal counsel, who were instrumental in creating the documents. I do see that this was not sent to the full council, so I'm just going to send that to the full council now. But perhaps, Crystal, you could walk us through the ordinance.
I will do my best. I know we've talked about this kind of in length, so I'm not sure.
So maybe it's just the changes since the last meeting. I'm trying to get this over to Joe. Sorry.
That's right. I'm trying to grab the most recent.
Go ahead, Councilor Murphy, if you like.
Yeah, I read through it. I did not see changes from what we had before us in terms of the ordinance and what I received the other day. I read them, unless I missed, but I think they were exactly the same from one reading to the next. So I don't think there's been any changes. We've discussed changes, but I didn't see anything in there. And I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was pretty much the same.
I can verify that, Councilor Murphy.
I can say that I made a couple of small changes on the regulations. I don't know if that was forwarded.
They were, yeah.
As well. So on the regulations for the Board of Health side, I reworded item number 3. If you look at the document from the Board of Health titled Procedures, City of Holyoke Board of Health Regulations for the Keeping of Hens. If you look at item number 3, that was reworded. And item number 9 also had an addendum on there. We added common porch at the end, which is essentially that addresses like common areas and interior areas, but there was concern that people might try to keep coops on shared porches. So that kind of just loops that in there. And then items number 22 and 23 were added at the end of that document. And those are just tidying things up. So, 22 is to sort of link the enforcement and penalties with that's mentioned in the ordinance. And then 23 is just an encouragement for people to do soil testing. And soil testing is predominantly for out of a concern that if there is increased lead for one reason or another in the soil, and you had egg-laying hens, you wouldn't want lead contamination to spread from the hen to the eggs, which lead will bioaccumulate and it will spread from one organism to another. And then on the application, we did change. I removed 1B on the application, which is the second page. I'm sorry, at the bottom of the first page. That section had to do with specifically listing out some of the.
Sean, what document are you working on now?
I'm sorry. Yeah, the application is called the City of Holyoke Board of Health Keeping of Hens applications. There's 2 documents from the Board of Health. One is the regulations, and then one is an application. So they're both 2 pages.
Okay.
And I believe they were forwarded. And on that applications page, one of the first items on there to help identify says application fee $20.
Yep.
If that helps you. Yeah. So if you look down under the section that says hen house and pen, in there was an item that specifically listed out some of the setbacks for accessory structures, and we removed that as it was unnecessary. And if any changes were made to the accessory structures section, it would require changing the regulations as well. So it just refers generally to that accessory structures section as opposed to listing out specific components.
So I will say, if you have my draft from the last time we spoke until now, there are no changes. We haven't changed anything on the actual ordinance. I know we've talked about a couple of things though since then that may need to be changed. So we found a discrepancy in dealing with the abutter notifications. Just timing wise, we want them to notify abutters via regular and certified mail. So if you look under part 2B, we go into how to notify abutters, and we're just having trouble trying to sort out what that timeline looks like, because we want to make sure that they're getting notifications to the abutters within a certain period of time that they're actually applying. And then we want the Board of Health to have time to hear some of the, not necessarily complaints, but concerns of the abutters. And so we need kind of a timeline for how that looks. So if you're sending out certified mail and you need either a green card or verification of delivery to be handed in with your application, and we're talking, you know, your mail is going to your next door neighbors, it should be, you know, a week or so turnaround, but as we all know, the mail gets stuck. So I don't know, we're looking for suggestions on some of that verbiage of timelines and what you all think. We have, you know, a minimum of 1 week, but no later than 30 days prior to the application. Basically, we don't want people sending abutter notifications and then applying 6 months later. And these people are all, you know, the comments and everything are kind of stale. You know, you don't know what their property looks like 6 months later. So we want it to be within a certain time frame of the application. And then we also want the abutters to have ample time from when they received the mail to be able to get to the Board of Health and express their comments or concerns. But we don't want to make the application process too lengthy either. So we're kind of stuck in this catch-22 of mailings and reasonableness.
I'll just say, I think in terms of mailings and reasonableness, the 100-foot abutter notification seems sufficient. I mean, I guess we could go through this. The couple of comments that I had from, let me just see. The few things that I thought we had to address were hens in the area where it was supposed to say, where it used to say 7 or more in the original ordinance. We're talking about hens. Sorry, no, we were keeping it chickens so that there was no change to the 7 or more in the RA zone. And then we were going to strike from the RA zone the up to 6 hens. And maybe that's in the zoning document as opposed to the...
Right. So the zoning, you'll see that was a separate document. So we have delete the current and add in its place. And where it's RA only, we left chickens or similar livestock permitted as a use. We didn't change that. And then we added the coop, hen house, and run for keeping of up to 6 hens has all of your other R1, R1A, R2. So it eliminates the confusion between RA and then all of the other residential.
Right. Right. So that was, I know that was a big concern that seems very well sorted out. Councillor Bacon, I know that was an issue of yours. I don't know if you want to comment on it, but I do see your hand up, so I'll go to you for now.
Thank you. I have a number of issues relative to this that were all discussed at the last meeting, and I just want to summarize them, looking to see if we can make some language changes. I just want to be sure, Crystal, with the language that you left it with the RA, that it's as of right.
Let me,
because that was the critical piece there, and I'm not clear on that.
so I'd have to, let me pull it in our actual zoning because I need the labels on the.
Okay, and then I'll go on to the other things. We had a lot of discussion. I will only support the expansion of the hens if it is a special permit given by the city council with a public hearing process and notice to abutters as all special permits are noticed. This is a matter of neighborhood interest. When people buy their homes, they buy them in a certain zone. If they buy them in a farm zone, they know their neighbors might have chickens or any other variety of animals. If they buy in a more urban setting, they do not have this expectation. So while I don't have, I'm not opposed to amending our ordinances, I feel that we must be very vigilant in also protecting the property rights of the neighbors in a situation such as this. Chickens are not a neutral presence in a neighborhood, particularly when the houses are close together. And folks have written to us that have been in farm and dealt with chickens, and that their waste is, particularly in hot weather, quite noticeable, the smell coming from it. And so for me, and I know others have spoken to this before me, so it's not my intention to speak for others, but we need to have a formal process where the neighbors can be heard. I know as ward counselor, and there's a number of ward counselors here, we deal with many issues in neighborhoods. And I think we should do everything in our power when we're changing a law to make sure people get to weigh in up front, because we all know that it's very, very difficult to fix the problems later on down the road. So that is a main point of mine. And then the as of right protection in the residential agriculture zone is of equal importance to me, because I'm not seeing that. It makes it look like they'd still have to go through the same process. So those are my two main things right now. Thank you.
Thanks. I think that, if I were to add to the list, the things that we discussed at last time are the two items that you just discussed about the RA zone, and then also whether we're doing this by special permit of the city council, the abutters notice, whether it's the same as the special permit or it's 100 feet. And then finally, setbacks. So we didn't explicitly prohibit roosters in the ordinance, which I believe we did amend to include that. On-site slaughter, we wanted to prohibit altogether. Setbacks, there was a discussion whether we need to make an explicit reference to 5 and 8 feet, since they are just mimicking the accessory structure setbacks, which the whole entire hen laying chicken ordinance, sorry, egg laying hen ordinance falls under. The disposal of solid waste was an issue. I think we talked about it being number one, I forget where it is, but I think, as we go through it, we could check on it. But the offal disposal, meaning deceased birds would be taken care of by something other than the solid waste in the city. So you couldn't just put offal in the trash, and I think we make a reference to that. And then no free range. I know that was an issue that we wanted to note. And then the annual renewal would be contingent on all fees, taxes, and whatever else being paid. So those are the handful of issues that we had up for discussion last time.
The other issue was buffer. It wasn't one I brought up, it was one somebody else brought up.
Yeah, so the buffer, so all accessory structures fall under a buffer of 5 and 8 feet. And so there's some discussion about whether we're mimicking chickadees, which are, I believe, 15, and I'd have to check my notes here.
50 from a dwelling.
50, right? 50?
15 from a side, 50 from any dwelling.
Right.
Yep. Okay, so I think those are the handful of issues there. So Councilor Murphy, I see your hand up. You could go ahead and jump in.
Thank you. I've been kind of doing a little more research on other ordinances in other cities. And one of the things in Chicopee that I liked was, and this would be, Sean, I probably would defer to you on this, but it made sense to me, especially in terms of trying to make sure everything is clean and neat, is that they require that the hen houses and the runners be disinfected at least 3 times a year. I don't think we got that, but maybe we do, and I haven't seen it.
Yeah, that is in here.
Okay.
It's
So
in the
number
regulations.
14
itself.
under the regulation says hen houses shall be cleaned on a weekly basis and sanitized quarterly.
Okay.
So four times a year.
Okay, all right. So they just use different language. Okay. And then the other thing there, and this is kind of related to zoning, that they in Chicopee, they do not allow tenants or condo owners. So since condo owners would be in some of the zones that we're talking about, how are we going to handle that? Because does a condo owner, obviously there are shared properties, and then there's their property. I mean, obviously in Chicopee, they felt to start with they wanted to exclude that for now. I don't know if it doesn't look like they've amended it up at this point, but that's another issue that I think we should have to review, because if we go just by zoning and don't create some of those kind of things, then we could be in a situation where, a person across the street can do it, but you're in a condo and you can't. And I just saw that and I thought it's something we should discuss.
I will say, Councilor Murphy, on our application, what we wrote is, if the applicant is not the sole property owner, we'd expect a signed written statement from all property owners granting permission for keeping of hens. So condos are expected to have a condo association.
Yep. And
in order for one person in a condo association to have that, if it was going to be on any shared or condo property, the expectation would be that the condo owners association would have signed off on it. And same thing for tenants. The way this is written is that, if you rent, your landlord would have to sign off.
Right.
That does not address the issue that we had talked about, where it would be first come, first serve. And that was always a concern of ours about, dealing with tenants being the owners or keepers of the hen versus the property owner is always going to make things a little more complicated. And that I'm not sure how you write that out without expressly saying tenants are not allowed to have that. And I don't know if that's the intent of the order. So I would leave that up to somebody else.
And if I can, one more thought that I met with somebody this past week who was very interested in trying to find ways to get more food out there. And this goes back to your original concept of your order, where you did mention, neighborhood gardens, whether they be gardens for plants, but the suggestion was made that maybe for those people in tenant neighborhoods, clearly last night we were talking about demolishing and creating vacant lots. And if we were in a position to provide a secure area where obviously they would do their own hen house and run, and they would have a locked in area, but the city would also have a garden locked in area where those people would have access, obviously to only their own. But that was another way in this person's mind and in mine, that potentially we could get people that are in tenants an opportunity, if they can do this, and in a situation where it's probably less invasive to their apartment building. And so again, Councilor Lisi, I know you were originally put the community gardens, and you probably, I don't know if you were thinking about hens in here, but I think that may also be something to look at, not only community gardens for growing plants and fruits, but also potentially community gardens where residents could have a place that they could keep hens and be able to maintain them and have some security in a city-owned property.
Yeah, if I may react to that, I love that idea. I think it's a really great idea. The more sort of nutrition, like literally nutrition, that we get from different plots of land, the better. And especially as like the density of the city becomes more and more in the downtown area, we have more people who would need that sort of access. I was just looking at the zoning bylaws, and currently the draft still says all residential zones, and I think that the last sort of amendment that I proposed was that it be limited to R1, R1A, R2, and then DR, so downtown residential, up to 6-unit dwellings. And I think that eliminates some of the first come, first serve problems that we may come in large apartment complexes, and then the sort of community garden serving as a supplement to some of the units downtown and creating access there. I think that would make sense. But I see Sean reacting, and I did see Councillor Anderson Burgos have his hand up earlier, and now Councillor Hernandez. So let's go in that order. Sean, Juan, and then Libby.
So my only issue with the community gardens being a shared space for living animals is that there would have to be someone on the city side who is specifically responsible for supervising those animals. At that point, you would be keeping live animals on city property, and if people for any reason were to abandon them, they were to fall ill and not be able to care for them, they were to have some monetary issue, whatever, you still have live animals that are then not able to care for themselves on city property. And there would need to be somebody who would have to look after them and also make sure that they're being kept up with regularly, because at this point, if any nuisance is created, it would be on a city property. And you would also need someone to regulate that shared land. I mean, planting plants and, kind of passive things like fruit trees is one thing, but when you have a live animal, they're going to need someone to sort of make sure they're being kept after. And I don't know who would be doing that and what resources they would have, and if they're going to have the tools.
Right. And we did somewhat table that sort of conversation about the community gardens from the main ordinance here, because clearly there's a lot more details to be figured out, and we're having we have enough on our hands at the moment to figure out these details. So we sidebarred that conversation about the community gardens and chickens. Councillor Anderson Burgos?
Yeah, so I carefully looked over the application. And to be honest, to be quite frank, I was very impressed. I mean, it looks like the application has covered, if not all, at least, most of our concerns. And in thinking of chickens, I'm not sure how people are interpreting having a neighbor that has chickens, because there are people who have dogs. I love dogs, don't get me wrong, and dogs can be quite annoying. They can be loud, bark, bark, bark. They can wake you up in the middle of the night. I don't think chickens do bark. I mean, that's the safe bet, right? They're very quiet animals. Not to mention, the visits I've been to. When I went to Puerto Rico, a lot of my family and friends over there have chickens, and I don't recall a smell. And they're contained. They're I think, and not to mention this, also not to mention the educational value that our kids and our kids' can gain from this. This is so crucial, especially at a point right now, that one needs to have securement when it comes to food. This is like just this year. For the first time, my husband and I, we decided to make our own little garden. And the educational, the process, it made me connected to the process. It brought me back to like good earth, if you will. And I think this is something that a lot of the residents, if you look at your emails, there's a lot of concerns, and they're pro for chickens. They really want to, involve themselves in this, because it's healthy, it's educational, like I said, and I think it's something that I'm pretty much ready to move forward with, and I'm hoping that the rest of the council will start looking at it as an educational piece to our community. But let's work together, let's work through the kinks and figure out what's the next step to get Holyoke on that path.
Thank you, Councillor Hernandez, and then Councillor Bacon.
Thank you so much. And through the chair, I want to thank all the research that our Councilor Murphy has done and hitting the ground and speaking with residents and looking at other towns. very important. I welcome also all the questions and concerns that our counselor Linda Bacon has. And I mean, it's all very important to look at it so we can really like mold this process so it can work in the future. And Councilor Murphy, when you mentioned the community gardens, and I know that we're not at that step and we're not even looking at that, but what comes to my mind is the hidden treasure, the garden up in Bowdoin Village, in which Sullivan School allow that big 217 unit family development that's managed by the Housing Authority to have that space. And with the collaboration of Nuestras Raíces, they were able to expand and grow fresh vegetables and fruits for their families. At some point, like at least close to a decade ago, they before I left from working with the Housing Authority, they were asking about the possibility of having chickens for protein, for eggs. And at that point, this conversation, you know, I mean, Holyoke at that point was not even trying to entertain the chickens in the backyard, but in the future, that could be a great avenue to allow big communities that are in food deserts to have a place that they can, because they live in apartments, so they wouldn't be able to have the chickens there, but to be able to grow and have these chickens in an area that's controlled, right, and that they can follow all the regulations. I think that it will be fantastic. But baby steps, right? First, we would like to, but I want to thank you, and I want to thank all of you and all the work, and I hope that like Anderson Burgos, our counselor, states, that we can all work together and trying to also bring Holyoke to the same path that the neighboring towns in which this hasn't been you know, a problem, and they have been able to deal with it, and it has moved forward successfully. Thank you so much.
Councilor Bacon?
Yes, so I'd like to offer some amendments to the language that's in front of us.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion that as part of the application process, there's the special permit that would be through the special permit process of the city council.
Second
and
that.
I would also propose to be sure that the as of right for the RA zone is protected in the language that currently exists. And to formalize our earlier discussion that you referred to relative to the R zones, that the keeping of chickens would be expanded from as of right in the RA zone to R1, R1A, R2, and DR up to 6 by special permit of the city council. I'll leave it to others relative to the matter of the buffers. I'm not very well informed on that. So those would be my motions for consideration of the committee at this time. Thank you.
I'll second those, and if I could just ask a question.
Sure, go ahead, Councilor Murphy.
And if I'm out of line, that's okay. I can wait.
No, go ahead, comment, and then I think we need to take each of these items up as individual amendments as opposed to as a package. And I do think we should hear from Crystal about the as of right piece. The one thing I'll say there is that at the end of the day, we're not making any changes to the RA zone. I think the one thing that we may need to highlight is that in the application, so the Board of Health application for the hens should just specify that this application is for the hens in these zones, up to 6 hens in these zones somehow, as opposed to hens anywhere in the city. And that's not by ordinance, that would just be a Board of Health regulation, but to clarify, absolutely. Go ahead, Councilor Murphy.
So just regarding the first question. So in terms of our special permit process now, what is the dimension in terms of people that have to be notified? Is it 200 feet, 300 feet, 500 feet?
300 feet of a butter notification. 2 weeks of paid notification in paper of record. And then it has to be noticed for both the city council and the planning board. Public hearings have to be held by both bodies. A recommendation from the planning board has to be sent over to the ordinance committee, and then we would vote on that recommendation.
Point of order, a special permit does not have to include the planning board necessarily. We don't for the marijuana special permits.
But this would be a matter of zoning, so it would be required.
Not if we change the zone. We're doing that now. If we do it, then we would simply be granting the special permit under the new zone.
Sure. Let's have legal comment on that point as well as the as of right point. And unless Councilor Murphy, you have any other issues that you wanted to raise related to this?
So, you know, my thought is, again, trying to find a compromising ground that also protects the neighbors and gives people a chance to successfully do this. That I'd be inclined to say, okay, if we were looking at 100 and it is 300, maybe we make it 200, which would probably be about no more than 3 neighbors on each side, I would think, in most cases. And it might actually be 2 neighbors on both sides. And I also would, because I think the idea of a letter directly to those neighbors that are affected gets that notification, I would be inclined to waive the other aspects in terms of newspaper publications and things along that lines, which would make it more burdensome. But in terms of the communications, I mean, those are just, I mean, I think the neighbors that are going to be there are the ones that need to be notified. So, I mean, there could be someone 300 feet from me that will have no idea what's happening on my property. There'll be somebody that's, you know, 150 or 200 feet that very well will know what's happening. And I'm just trying to find a way to see if we can make this process work without being overly burdensome, but making sure that the people that should be notified are notified. And if it was 300, I still would say we try to do it with a letter notification rather than a newspaper publication. What did you say, 2 weeks ahead of time?
2 weeks of paid notification in the paper record.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one thing that I would say in terms of, you know, compromise, I think that, you know, if we take the abutter notification at 200 feet and make it still the special permit by the Board of Health as opposed to the City Council, then neighbors are able to register their comments, but it becomes, you know, I think a more expedited and technical review as opposed to what I would see as, you know, politicizing, you know, neighbor disputes. And again, if we're going to alter the special permit by the City Council process, I feel like why not just create that process through the Board of Health, let the Board of Health oversee it, as opposed to bringing everybody into City Council if we're not going to create the same sort of notification requirements. Councilor Bacon, I see you wanting to comment on that point.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My point is for it to be equitable for the citizens who are seeking a special use. So if somebody wants to have a nail salon in their house, they have to do the notices, the ads, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think we could have a lot of debate about what would be infringing on a neighbor more or less than another. And an argument could be made, well, that wouldn't infringe on anybody except the people living directly next door or behind or in front. And I think in the future, we could perhaps take up a different order and look at the special permit process and have a debate and discussion as to whether we think the notice has to be X feet or some other amount of feet. But that isn't my point. And I clearly heard the Board of Health directors say they're not set up to do public hearings. And I, as a ward counselor, hearing from individuals all the time on many variety of issues in their neighborhoods, this is a big neighborhood issue. And we need to have an open and transparent process. We are elected by these people for these very reasons, in my view. So it is a very strong position that I have on the special permit public hearing. It's not to make it an onerous thing any more than it's to make it an onerous thing for somebody who wants to do a nail salon in their home or some other type of non-invasive home business. But yet, because it is a change in law, change in use, we afford all the parties that will be affected a public opportunity to be heard. And it needs to be in the public, and it needs to be open, and it needs to be an opportunity for the people to be heard, not a letter into an office that's going to get put in a file and either given merit or by the decision of one person found not to have any merit. So this is a transparency issue that I feel very strongly about. And as much as there have been people weighing in for this expansion, there have been people also weighing in that are not supportive of it at all. So I really feel a strong obligation to represent all the interests of all the parties here. And that is the only way, in my view, that we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Hernandez and then Councilor McGivern. And then Sean, I see your hand as well.
I'm all set. I lower my hand. I'm not going to add anything else.
Councilor
Thank you.
McGivern.
Thank you, Councilor Lisi. I think Councilor Bacon said it all. I'm on record that the special permit was important to me. I think you've done a wonderful job with the regs and the safety issues and health conditions and a lot of things, including buffers and everything. But if neighbors don't have the opportunity to come before and be heard, and then a vote take place on a special permit, it's a mute process. It's not being fair to the neighbors. I respect what Sean said. I mean, the Board of Health does public hearings, but if he says they can't handle this type of public hearing, that's our health director. Mm-hmm. I mean, I went to a public hearing on needle exchange at the Board of Health, and they handled it very well. Shouldn't have been in front of them, and the courts agreed with us on that, but they did a good job in the public hearing. And I just think neighbors deserve a right, and I think it has to be advertised by law if it's going to be a true public hearing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So, and just to be clear, the way that it's set up now is that it's not a public hearing in front of the Board of Health. It's just a review and along with a butter notification. But Sean can speak to that.
And that's why I objected to it earlier meetings, and I stand by that. It's make or break for me.
Okay. Councilor, Mr. Gonzalez.
Hi. So I'm gonna sort of, repeat what I had said in previous ones, and to Councilor Bacon's point, I do think that while this is getting a fair amount of publicity, and while this is being heard by people who are interested in it, I do think that there's going to be opportunities for this to be sort of some property owners are going to find this to be sort of a startling. They're not going to realize or know that this is happening or that this is a possibility. And as I said, we do have sort of a lot going on right now. I don't know that COVID is going to dissipate anytime soon, and the volume of hearings and the length of time that people are going to want to be heard and their issues to be considered, I think is going to be burdensome. And I really do believe that people do want to be heard. They're going to want to feel like their issues are validated. And frankly, if council can hear that and make a decision and people feel like it's equitable, that would make it much more practical and smooth for us to then do the rest of the process, which is going to the property, figuring out what needs to be done, inspecting, making recommendations, reviewing plans, and getting the actual coops up and running. So if we can be presented by council with, okay, these 10 properties are ready to go and the neighbors have been heard and people feel like they were given a fair hearing and now these are ready, we can just follow the basic rules and regulations and get things going out. I think it would be much more smooth as opposed to having the Board of Health have to hear and then adjudicate each individual property with a hearing. We're going to stick to what has been proposed, where we receive comments and we take them under advisement. I'm comfortable doing that. Eric and myself would be the ones primarily reviewing that, and I think that we're capable of doing that. But I do also realize that that is not going to have the same weight for neighbors as having an opportunity to speak. And there are multiple other processes like nail salons or restaurants or other permitting types that the Board of Health handles that we do not handle the special hearing for. So if you wanted to put a, you know, like the Dan's power plant is a great example. He wanted to make vegan cheese in his home. We didn't handle the special permit for that. The council took care of that. And then we were told they have the approval. We took care of the rest. And so I'm comfortable that those processes can work hand in hand if that is what is necessary.
Sure, thank you. Councilor Hernandez.
Yes, thank you. And I just wanted to add, right? I mean, how is it that we can do this without creating that extra burden, like economically? I'm thinking about the economic piece of the 2-week ad. For people, I mean, there's all sorts of people in Holyoke, all economic statuses, and there's going to be people that are going to want to have chickens in their backyards that don't necessarily, we're doing this like to allow opportunities for food access. What do we do like for the economically strapped that have the opportunity to have chickens in their backyards? How are they going to be able to move forward with the 2-week ad and all these different, you know, requirements that are going to be imposed here? How do we work around that? What do we do with, you know, also the process is gonna, it looks like, you know, so complicated as it is. What about for the community in Holyoke under the LEP, the limited English proficiency, that they're not gonna know how to go and sift through all of this? What do we do about that? Thank you.
Thanks. And then Sean, is your hand up in response to that, or is that a remnant from before? I think, you know, I'm adverse to the special permit because of the same reasons that Councilor Hernandez brought up. I do see that, you know, the will of the council seems to be leaning towards the special permit in the like traditional formalized process with notification that we tend to always use whenever it's a special permit by the city council. And that I even hear the Board of Health director saying, you know, like right now, they probably wouldn't be able to deal with the new influx of people who want to weigh in on neighbors having chickens. So, you know, perhaps the compromise is that we start off by expanding into these residential zones with the special permit, and then after a year or so, where sort of like the main influx happens, we could then, you know, post-COVID, revert to a you know, fully permitted by the Board of Health version of this. So maybe we start off with the City Council special permit public hearing and move from there. I see Councilor Murphy with his hand up, and then I think we need to get some advice from Crystal to just see if we can modify the notification requirements for special permit.
Thank you. I think one of the things, and obviously I'm a Ward 2 councilor, and obviously my Spanish is not very great. However, you know, I do get constituents that contact me, and I do have people that can help me to be able to go and explain the process and walk people through, and I've walked people through process. And I would certainly be willing to do that if any of my, or anybody contacted me and needed that kind of assistance. There's also an economic expense, and I've gotten, you know, again, doing more research, that there's an economic cost in terms of being able to maintain the hens. So someone's, if we can make this process to get the notification somewhat economically reduced, there's going to be a cost. So they have to have at least enough money to be able to get the hens, get the hen house, and all that kind of thing. So there is an economic cost that they're going to have to bear one way or the other. And I would much prefer that when they do bear it, they're bearing it with the blessing of their neighbors, in the city. And then we're in a position where, you might get assistance from somebody who might say, I see you're having a hard time. Maybe I can give you a hand and maybe you give me some egg. Maybe there's some of that goes on. So, and I do, as I said in the beginning, when this first started, I too have the belief that neighbors have to know and that they should be part of the process. I said in the beginning, there may be times that we reject, but there'll be times when it gets accepted. And those times when it gets accepted might create an environment that lets other people who originally were against it start to think, maybe I can have this in my neighborhood and be more okay with it. So I kind of agree with your thoughts, Councilor Lisi, that, sometimes you start small, you work little things, and then, immediately in the beginning, not everybody will benefit. But if you start to benefit some and there's no problems, I would think in a future reference, it may become much easier to do that. And the last thing I do want to say, though, I still believe in the 15-foot side and the 50-foot from dwelling that we need to put into that ordinance.
Okay, so let's start with Mr. Gonzalez, are you trying to speak again, or is that still on remnant? Okay, go ahead.
I just was going to suggest, in response to Councilor Hernandez's question about some people not having funds to pay for some of the postings, this is a suggestion, and maybe it's too complicated, but we could potentially increase the permit fees to an amount that makes sense, and a portion of the permit fees could be held aside. And if there was somebody who had needs, they could apply to the council as part of their permit application. And we could subsidize part of it with money set aside from the permit fees. And like I said, I don't know if that would be too difficult to set up, but it is a way where in circumstances that there is someone who has needs and is not able to meet them, that we draw from the process to keep that going.
Thanks for that. So just wanted to say, so, one of the things that I thought Councilor Murphy was going to say about, if there are limited funds, I thought you were going to say that you'd rather see those funds invested in the coop and the run and the hens to make sure that they're well kept and not becoming a nuisance. So you went in a slightly different direction. I do want to bring it to everyone's attention that noticing for a public hearing and also sending out the abutters notification typically costs around $250. So it's not nothing, and it is a barrier. I don't think that even increasing the the permit fees by $5 would be able to create the sort of revenue stream to help offset those notification issues, the cost of that notification.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, let me just say, so $250, I asked Ryan how much it costs the city to notice the marijuana permits that we hear as a special permit, and it's the 2 weeks you pay by letter in the advertisement with the Republican. So you pay by letter. They typically run around $200 to $250. I'm sorry, around $200 to $250, and then there's often another $50 of a butter notification depending on how dense the neighborhood is, because you have the 300-foot buffer. Downtown industrial areas are going to be more dense and require more butter notification as opposed to the R1, R2 zones uptown. So just want to make that clear for everybody. Councilor Bacon.
So thank you. So relative to that, that is why it's a good idea to come up with as short as possible as for ad notification that gets to the issue, but doesn't waste too much money and space in the paper. And secondarily, in terms of some of the research I was doing on this, it looks like the price or the cost for putting this together, if somebody wants to do it, is around $800 to $1,000. So unless the person can do everything by themselves, they're very handy and they can build and buy just from the basic materials. So this is an investment that a person is going to have to be making. And so the cost of the advertising would be maybe 10% of the cost of the project, maybe 20 at the most. So I think it has to be factored in, but it's not like it otherwise doesn't cost anything. So I think we need to be clear on that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Gonsalves, is that your hand? No. Okay. So then from legal counsel, Crystal, do you mind just helping to clarify if there is a way that we can alter the public hearing and notification requirements for this particular special permit, or would it have to be what we always do for all special permits?
So you could amend the ordinance so that it reads just specific for this section. It's the same way we do it for, so generally abutters are 300 feet, but under the way we have it worded right now, and I realize there may be changes upon a vote, but we have abutters just for this section listed as within 100 feet. So you can make the permitting process however you'd like. It's similar to, like we have, Board of Public Works things that, they're done a little differently. Certainly if it's a special permit for the city council, I mean, it's simpler to have everything run the same way, but it's not unheard of to make this section have a different notification process. I mean, as it is right now, we're trying to send it to the Board of Health and have comments and abutters notified, within a different time period, et cetera. So you can create the verbiage however you'd like.
So even though it would be a special permit of the city council, we could reduce the notification from 2 weeks to 1 week in a paper of record? Because I think that's where the real cost is. That's where the real burden is coming from.
A newspaper record.
I don't think so.
So, right, this isn't, a required public hearing under zoning regulations or anything like that. This is something that our political body is creating. So if you want to make your public hearing requirement different, you could certainly do that. It's a little odd because, like I said, special permits also fall under Chapter 40A. But if you wanted to amend it, I don't see why you couldn't. It really does make it confusing though. So, I mean, to me, I think we should keep things simple and similar across the board so that people aren't required to jump. As it is, this ordinance jumps all over our ordinances because we relate so many other ones.
Right.
So it's a little difficult to read as it is. I'd hate for it to have a special process, and now, even the clerk's office is now going to have to deal with that distinction as well. So kind of streamlining things would make life a little easier for everybody.
It seems like one way to keep things somewhat the same, but then also, perhaps cut out some of the costs is if we do just 300 feet of a butter notification without the newspaper advertisement. That way, we're still doing 300 feet just like we do for every other special permit. That doesn't get more confusing, but we could strike the public hearing requirement in the newspaper. But what then would be the city council's responsibility, because we do typically have the notification of the special permit with newspaper notification. Like if we put it on the agenda, would we have to notice it in the newspaper?
If we're doing a public hearing, you would have to notice it. Right, this gets really complicated. I mean, you're also talking about 300 feet buffer. I mean, that's huge for, say you wanted, to own a dog. I mean, would you, and I guess the other concern comes in, and this came up recently, what about when you abut a condo? You have to notify every condo owner, and if they're stacked on top of each other, you've got people who are going to have to notify quite a few abutters compared to somebody who might just live, on a quieter street.
Right. So then at the end of the day, because of our notice requirements related to the public hearing, we have the ability to change the special permit requirements all we want. However, the public hearing requirement that folks are pushing for are governed by other rules that require the notification and a butter notification.
Yeah, we run into kind of a mix of situations here when we start getting into public hearing versus just a public meeting and an application process. You run into public hearing requirements, and making this different from others is going to really confuse people. Not only the people trying to apply, but the people trying to deal with it on the city's end.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like it cannot be amended if there is that desire to have special permit with a public hearing. I just want to make, that's what I hear you saying, and then I just want to make sure that the committee understands that.
Yeah, I mean, you run into the Chapter 48 regulations if we are going to start calling it a special permit.
What do we call the things that come under communications for renewals of home occupancy? What are they called?
Those are special permits.
They are called special permits.
Hmm? And then once they're granted, then the renewal doesn't require any other process as long as everything is in order. It's a one-time process.
Is that the case? Is it, I mean, is it a home occupancy permit or is it a special permit? I can't recall. I'd have to look at an agenda.
So we run into the special permit requirement of Section 9 in Chapter 40A if we start wanting this to be a use under special permits.
Yeah, there's just no way around that. I mean, it could be renewed easily, but we can't get around the cost and notification requirements. All right, so let's go from there. So there is an amendment, I believe it was made by Councilor Bacon and seconded by Terry Murphy, that this up to 6 chickens use be by special permit with public hearing and all notification that's required.
Special permit with
Well,
the
by special permit through the city council. That's all I said.
Special permit through the city council, and it does imply is a requirement of a public hearing with 300-foot abutter notice and the 2 weeks of formal notification in the paper. So on that motion then, all in favor?
Aye.
No. I need, if I could get the hands, or I need to see Councilor Anderson, Burgos, and Libby Hernandez.
I said no.
And one. Okay, so that motion fails. So as of now, given that that's failing, it's a permit by the Board of Health with 100-foot abutter notification. The as of right issue was raised by Councilor Bacon. And Crystal, given that we actually made no changes to the R1 aspect of it all, does it make sense that it continues to be sort of as of right, because there have been no changes to the RA section regarding the hens?
The only change we made was we added the word chickens, because then we separated out chickens up to, so where you see the big chunk on the zoning amendment, we added in, after game birds, we added in chickens. And so that's under your RA only. So nothing in RA changed. We just added in chickens to be clear, because then we add another line in the table under 442, which is coop hen houses and runs for keeping up to 6 hens. And so I just need clarification, because I know this has come around a lot, what we're trying to do with the R zones now. I know there's been some discussion. So are we keeping it as drafted, R1, R1A, R2, and then we've got RM20, RM40, 60, RO, and DR?
Well, I think we'll get to that in amendment. So what I hear you saying about the RA only zone is that we added chickens to make it clear that it was hens or roosters could be kept in RA.
Right.
And that all the previous sort of requirements are untouched regarding the RA zone and the keeping of hens, chickens, livestock.
Right. So RA, right. We just wanted to clarify, because then once we get into our ordinance as drafted, we start removing roosters. We only allow up to 6. We wanted it to be sure that RA was distinguished, like in that we didn't change their rights. We just added in the word chickens to make it clear that, you know, hens, roosters, et cetera, were still allowed, because game birds, similar livestock, it was sort of unclear. So we just put in the word chickens.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, then there was an an amendment made and seconded for striking the RM20 and higher zones from that zoning ordinance. So striking RM20, striking RM40, striking RM60, striking RO, and then limiting DR, downtown residential, to dwellings with 6 units or less. Okay, so on that motion then, I see 2 comments, sorry. Councilor Murphy, given...
Councilor McGivern was up first.
It's fine, go ahead, Chuck.
You're part of the committee, there's deference to the committee members.
I have deference for my friend and a colleague, even though he gives me grief all the time. But one of my problems with the downtown in the 6 units is that we are treating those apartment dwellers different than we're treating the apartment dwellers in South Holyoke or Churchill or at the park. So, you know, if we're going to allow it for an apartment building with 6, I think, you know, and again, my same concern is that we're going to have one family have it and the other families are not. But it'd be the same thing if it was, you know, R40 and it's a 8 or a 10 unit apartment building. I mean, again, I think we need to really be cautious in terms of apartment buildings right now, and try to figure out a way to make it more universally. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor McGivern.
On the multi-unit apartments, are we asking the individual apartment owners to apply for apartment, or the owner of the property? And do we take into consideration everyone who lives on the property, like unanimously?
The owner.
So it's
the owner?
The applicant.
The owner doesn't live in the apartment, doesn't even live in the city?
The applicant would be the resident, the apartment unit, but they would need a written statement of support from the property owner. So there's two things, and maybe Sean, you want to speak to this. I saw your hand go up, but so the applicant would be the apartment dweller, and they have to get a written sign off from the property owner saying that they can keep chickens on their property, on the owner's property, and that only one hen house and run can be kept on any property. However, if 2 families wanted to share up to the 6 hens, they could do that. So multiple families could partake in, you know, keeping hens as a collective effort, but it could never be more than 6 hens. Linda, is your hand up for that?
Well, it was. I was going to offer an amendment. No, I'll just leave it as it is. I'll leave it to others, because for me, the special permit is the be all end all anyway.
So Sean, did I miss anything, or that was all?
I was just going to mention that it would also be first come, first serve. And I think that was brought up by Councilor Murphy before. So, you know, if you had an apartment building, whomever applied first would be the one entitled. And yeah, you could share, obviously, the usage of the run between multiple tenants, but the first person to apply would essentially own the right to that until they departed or removed the coop. And then obviously we'd be reviewing these on a yearly basis. So if there were difficulties with one tenant, perhaps there'd be opportunities for another to step in at the owner of the property's discretion.
Councilor Murphy.
And technically, the other tenants don't have a say in terms of whether that person gets authorized to have the hints.
Right.
So,
They do. There is a butter notification up to 100 feet.
I
They
think
would
that
be
was,
allowed to weigh in on whether or not they thought it was a suitable place. So they could make any comments they wanted about that application.
I mean, and again, I'm just assuming an abutter means a neighboring property, not the property that you're applying, but I could be wrong. And that was the impression I had, that the landlord could do it, but that the other tenants didn't have a say. And I defer to Sean on that. I thought we had said that, but I could be wrong.
My expectation would be if you lived in a rental property, you'd have to notice everybody else that lived in the rental property as part of your abutter notice, up to and including posting, if it's just an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, you'd post the front and rear door, and more practically, you'd post each doorway if possible. We can spell that out in the ordinance that, abutters include neighboring tenants or tenants in the same unit. But that would be our expectation, is that all people in the unit, the larger unit, dwelling unit, would be noticed. And then, if you had 10 units and one person applied and we got 5 or 6 notices saying that they strongly oppose this or they don't feel it's appropriate, that would be the opportunity for us to then go to the landlord and say, the majority of your tenants don't feel like this is the right step. Perhaps you want to reconsider. And that's where we can have more discussions. And that is sort of what I anticipate this feedback system looking like, is that if there is a majority of tenants don't feel like it's appropriate and they have a valid reason other than they just don't like birds, for instance, we could talk to the landlord about it and see how they felt about it once they had written information.
Okay, thank you.
I see Crystal's hand went up, but I want to get comments from Councilor McGivern if he's not frozen. He looks a little frozen at the moment. No, he's all right.
Getting chilly. I gotta turn the heat back on. What a beautiful day. Sean, I kind of get that, but say there's a 3-family home snugged in between a 10-apartment building on each side. They're abutters. Traditionally, what the city would do or require is that the owner of the property gets noticed, not every apartment dweller. So you're really opening up a can of worms.
Yep.
I'd want that to be spelled out, that you'd have to notice every dwelling. We could say that you have to notice every dwelling unit as opposed to dwelling, the unit being, every piece in the larger part. We could write that out. I agree that everybody deserves individual notice. If you have someone who lives in New Jersey and you send them a letter, who's to say that they're going to provide that letter to all 20 of their tenants?
They don't.
I agree that that's problematic.
Yeah, 4 out of 5 times, or maybe 3 out of 5 times they don't. That's always been a problem.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, Sean, are you saying, so is it all renters within the 100 feet? So each unit within the 100 feet, or are you saying all units within the building that's being considered and then abutters within 100 feet? So building owners within 100 feet.
I would say both. I would say everybody who lives in the area within 100 feet, dwelling units, dwelling owner, and neighbors deserve to be notified.
So all units, all abutting units within 100 feet.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. That's clarity that we didn't have before. So that's really helpful. Thank you to Councilor McGivern and Councilor Murphy for raising those issues. Legal counsel, Crystal.
So that's not the traditional definition of a abutter. It's owners. It would go to the owners of these buildings. The reason being that there's no way for an average person of the public to know who's living in the units. So how do you notice somebody if you don't know they live there? Whereas an owner is public record, the tenants are not. So I mean, yes, you could post on doors, but that's not valid service by any means. So again, we run into sort of a catch-22 here, where you've got legally what the requirement is and what the council is trying to do here, and it's just an average layperson there's no way to know who lives in all those units. If you live next to an apartment building, you don't know who lives in A, B, C, D on the first, second, third floor. Some of them are vacant. And per our requirements right now, you're sending certified mail. So if you're trying to mail something and you don't know who lives there, I don't know how people are going to get that done. And then you also run into the cost effectiveness of now you're talking about every unit in every building needing a letter versus the owners, which is the traditional sense of an abutter. So we're graying that area right now that I'm not sure how we get around that. I understand that we want the unit owners to be able to speak out. I don't know how to do that in a legal sense because there's just no way to do that.
Mm-hmm. So I wonder if it could be something like when you get a building permit, you have to put the sign in the window saying that you have the building permit. So 100-foot butter notification is traditional legal concept of owners, but in the building itself, you need to, for that 14-day period, put a sign on the door that says you can submit comments to the Board of Health on this consideration. Councilor Bacon?
I'd like to offer motion that we reconsider our vote on the special hearing by the City Council. This process is becoming more and more convoluted the more that we talk about it. And I'm not seeing the cost savings if they're going to have to notice by certified mail to all the apartment dwellers plus the legal abutters. And so I would ask my colleagues to seriously consider doing this through the open and transparent process of the City Council. Give it a try, as we discussed earlier, see how it goes. If it's working out really well, then we can always amend going forward. Thank you.
So I'll just say that I don't think that the process is getting convoluted. I think that it's we're doing a process of clarifying the language, and there's been a lot of different avenues or suggestions proposed for how to build some compromises here, and it's only through that conversation really get clarity and clear about what we're talking about here, and then write the ordinance in a way that absolutely communicates our intentions and the requirements. I see Councilor Anderson Burgos raising his hand.
Yeah, I think that would be a bad idea to bring full City Council into something that I think just a few of us can sort it out. The more voices we get in on this topic, the longer it's going to be drawn out. I'm sorry, City Council, we have a lot of work to do to just bring this to the table so that we can discuss this. We'll be there for hours. Imagine it's us that we're trying to figure this out. I can't imagine the full City Council trying to figure this out. This is something I think can be accomplished amongst ourselves. We just have to figure it out. We just have to be a little patient, and I'm willing to, put my patience in. So we just got to figure it out.
Through the chair.
Councilor Bacon.
So my point isn't that the City Council should debate this. My point is that I'm asking for reconsideration of the vote that said no to the special permit process, because it's becoming clear through our discussion that the notice of all the apartment dwellers and the abutters will likely be as cost prohibitive as the concerns relative to the City Council public hearing as we are having this clarifying discussion. Gotcha. So that's the point, and that's why I'm asking the committee to reconsider. I personally believe that if we do not keep the process public, that the entire endeavor will likely fail at the City Council. Thank you.
Councilor Murphy, and then back to Councilor McGivern.
Yeah, and again, trying to figure out what can work, and I know there's no perfect way here, but I'm pretty confident, and I could be wrong, but based on all the comments I've heard, that for this to have a realistic chance, I think we need to have the City Council deal with that special permit. And again, I could be wrong, but as it is right now, I could not vote for it because whether, and it may be very simple and it may not be anything, but it is a change to what, when someone bought that property to what is being allowed potentially next door. My hope is that by doing this, we just open up the process. Yes, we do educate people, and that we get some successes and we show that those successes are there, and then maybe we amend the process in the future. I will also say, I mean, we've done a lot of work, and I commend you for your dedication to this cause. And I just think if we send it with the idea that it's going to go to a special permit by the city council, I think it has a better chance of passing, and I think it has a better chance of the implementation to be enacted in the near future. Again, I made it clear that I also believe in the special permit process, and that the city council, and nothing against John, I have the utmost respect for him. I consider him an outstanding public servant, but I don't think he should be in the position to be dealing with trying to work out and see what the comments are, see what the concerns are, and try to resolve those. And I understand the economic situation, but again, there are other factors here, and I think we have a chance potentially to unify. But if we go the other way, I don't think we're unifying. So that's, and I did second that motion just in case.
Thank you. Before we take up the motion, I'll go to Councilor McGivern under discussion.
Thank you. Madam Chair, if I could ask a question to the city solicitor. Christo, the proposal here would be an amendment to our zoning code of ordinances. As a special permit would be added to the principal table, I believe.
Accessory uses.
So it's currently, the change is coming under 442 permitted uses.
Well, right now our zones don't permit this. And what you're suggesting, in certain zones beyond RA, it would be permitted by special permit of the city, of a special permit. That special permit is required, is an amendment to the zoning code. And under section 9-3, it's required that it would come under the table of principles. Am I wrong?
It would come under 442 under accessory uses, where we also allow animals accessory to dwellings. So we're basically allowing the hens in the coops, and then the hens come as an accessory to the accessory dwelling. But you're saying under section 9 in zoning?
No, the under the table of principles, you refer to section 9-3 as to reasons for denying a special permit.
Yeah, and I'm hunting. So under the table
of principles is 4-3, but
correct.
Within that, you look at section 9-3, which is what talks about that. This is where whenever we do zoning, we do special permits, like even the overlay zone, we have to have reasons to deny.
So it falls under accessory uses. Hang on. So it would, I pulled what planning gave us, and they didn't mention changing this table. So we've got residential uses, exempt, and institutional uses. I would think it would fall under residential uses, but it doesn't. It's an accessory use. It falls under a different table, is my understanding.
It has its own table. The whole accessory use chart,
So instead
it has its own table for its own zones with these different.
So let me ask a question. Accessory uses are by special permit?
Sort of.
Sort of. They're not. That's why it doesn't belong in accessory uses.
But
if
we
you're
do.
gonna do special. So the planning board weighed in on this. They weren't weighing in on special permits.
We do have special permits for some of them, like family daycares and ATMs. You do special permits for those. And those fall under accessory uses as well.
Well, let me ask you a question about accessory uses. It's an amendment to the zoning code, correct?
Correct.
9 votes from the city council, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
So we're
9
changing
votes.
the table.
There's 3 minus here. Thank you.
Sure. So then on the motion, unless there's anything else, on the motion to reconsider the special permit requirement by the city council.
Yes.
All in favor? Aye. I'll just note that if we're going to sort of move in this direction for the special permit by the city council with the full public hearing and a butter notification that it requires, I do want to see the more relaxed setback requirements. I do think that the ones from Chicopee can become a little bit prohibitive. I think that we've set aside specific setbacks for bodies of water, which of course are a concern. Also, you know, from public ways, but I would want to see more relaxed setback requirements than the Chicopee standards. But on the motion that we amend the ordinance to include a special permit by the city council with a public hearing and all the notification requirements. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? I'm going to say that that is a 5-0 then. Moving forward, we still didn't take a vote on the striking of the multi-unit dwellings except for DR up until 6 units.
I would like to strike the DR, either strike the DR with up to 6 units or add some of the other apartments. I mean, it's I just can't see I can allow one apartment because you happen to live downtown, and the other person who lives, you know, 1 block away in an R40, 6 units, they can't do it. So that's my concern. I'm just trying to be equal throughout if I can.
Right, but you're creating you know, sort of a two-sided sense of equity. So like one is the number of units in the dwellings, right? So I'm sorry, 6 units, 10 units, 20 units, 60 units. So we can either create some equity within the units and strike them all, or give all the units access, or we can say, because we don't want individual renters to have an advantage over other renters, that if we reduce the dwellings in which chickens, backyard hens are allowed to 6 units or less, there's less inequity within those renters in that particular unit, right? Do you understand what I'm saying there? Like, so one person having a hen house out of 60 tenants is more inequitable than one person out of 6 families having access to hens. There is more of an opportunity to share amongst 4 or 6 families than one hen house and 60 families. Do you see the difference?
I don't disagree with you there, but again, I mean, in my ward there are 8 units, 10 units, and I agree. Yes, one getting it out of 10 is less equal than one getting it out of 6, but they're still doing the same. It's still the same problem to me, in that. And I could see a landlord having a favorite tenant and saying, "Okay, I'll let you do it, but I'm not letting somebody else do it." But
there would only be allowed one.
No, I understand it. No, I understand it, but I mean that's my concern, is that it's not equal for all the people living in that apartment to have the same right. And again, I probably won't hold that up, but that is a concern I have. It's hard for me to say that, okay, you live in a 6 unit in a R20 or an R40, but you can't do it but if you were living in a DR with up to 6 units, you could. That's, you know, I mean, that's my concern.
Sure. Let's see how the motion pans out, because the amendment has been made and seconded. All in favor to amend it and just to be specific and clear. Sorry. R1, R1A, R2, and DR up to 6 unit dwellings to allow hen houses. All in favor?
I had my hand up for a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I just wanted to enter into the discussion with Councilor Murphy a little bit. I'm sort of looking at this a little bit like a pilot project. And so I'm thinking that if we give access to some multi-apartment dwellers, it helps us to get an understanding of the interest and how, if there is interest, it might work in thinking about down the road, maybe expanding it to more. I think if we never make it available at all, it's going to be very hard to figure out if it could be good. So I would support leaving it in. It's not totally equal, but neither is first come, first serve. So we're never going to get it perfect. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments. Councilor Bartley, thanks for joining us. I see your hand up.
Oh yeah, I just want to make sure I'm just a point of order, Madam Chair. I've been following this. It's been a really good discussion, so thank you. I'm learning a lot. But just so I'm clear, are we? And I'm not being mean, okay? Just make it clear. But for members of the committee, are they required to like say their vote, Madam Chair? It's just a point of order, Madam Chair. So I see like thumbs down, and then I saw a vote that I didn't see. I didn't see members of the committee. They got their mics off. So I'm trying to follow it, and I want to make sure I'm hearing the votes. It's like not all the committee members are you don't have to say anything. I mean, you don't have to verbalize a discussion. I mean, that's up to individual councilors, but I think the votes have to be audible. I might be wrong on that, but I just want to state that just as a point of order, Madam Chair, and that's all. I'm not being mean. It's just I'm just observing it. Okay. That's all.
I am calling the votes to make sure that I am reading people's sort of hand signals and intonations correctly. I mean, when it was closer, like the 3-2, I asked for a show of hands so I could get that absolutely correct. But I think, it's often in council where, the yays and the nays, and we understand where the vote is. And then if people have a need for more clarity, we could ask for that show of hands. And I do believe that I've been. If
we need for clarity, yeah, but usually we verbalize a vote, whether it's on the microphone or that's usually the initial, but I'll let you rule on it. That's your call on that. I believe that's what we've traditionally done. We've said it out loud, yay or nay, and that's all. But that's all. Thank you. Thanks for taking me up.
Yeah, thanks. And again, I do feel like I'm calling the vote. So if there were any objections, or if someone felt that I didn't capture their vote correctly, they could object.
The first one was 5-0 though, right? That last one was 5-0, I think.
It was 5-0. Thank you. So the last, I think, point of order here for discussion is the setback requirements.
Well, we got it.
I think you have to vote on the
RA1. R1
motion.
That was the 5-0 vote that I just took. No.
No. That was the special permit.
Special permit. I'm sorry.
Right.
I did write it up in special permit land in my notes here.
The discussion went into a little bit of a tangent, so.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry about that, and thanks for monitoring and helping me along here. So on the motion then that we amend the existing zoning, the existing zones where we are allowing the coop to include R1A, R1, R1A, R2, and DR up to 6 unit dwellings. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved, and I believe that's a 5-0
Yes.
vote. Okay, 5-0 there.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I just wanted to point out that although I have 2 forms of that I'm attending this meeting, you see the L in the bottom, and doesn't have the microphone muted, and then the top does, but because my computer is set up like that. So when I cast a vote, although my microphone looks muted, for clarification, my voice is still radiating through my other sort of communication there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, setbacks. So what some members of the planning board suggested were 5 from the side, 8 from the rear, and then it was silent on from any dwelling. And then what Chicopee had was, sorry, I'm looking through here.
50 feet.
50 feet from any dwelling, but then it was also 10 and 15, 10 from the side and 15 from the rear.
Right.
So I would really like to make sure that, again, if we're doing notification of abutters and we're getting, you know, that abutter approval through the special permit process, that we keep the setbacks a bit more light, because we will be noticing, we will be having the public hearing. We will have a lot of opportunity for neighbors, especially direct neighbors, to say whether or not this would be a problem in their neighborhood or on their property.
I'd be willing to make an amendment to make it 10 feet setback on the side, but I do think the dwelling, I mean, I think in most cases, the 50 feet would be something that would be, I'm assuming you got a yard that you got to put the hens in, so I'm still pretty confident that the 50 would work in most cases. And I do think, and again, I've done more research on hens, Libby, than I've ever done in my life. I listened to the egg song. And I wouldn't want that egg song going on at 2 in the morning in a summer day when I had my window open. And I've tried to do a few other things to find out. So I think it's that part I would like to see us stay. The side, while I would prefer longer, I can compromise and make it 10, which would be halfway through.
The side is between 10 and 5. Those are the 2 points on the side. The rear is 15 and 8. And then there's a third measurement that's 50 feet from any dwelling.
What I had down was only our recommended, or the original thing just said 5 foot side.
That's what we proposed.
Yeah.
So if we mimic the accessory use ordinance, they automatically come with a side setback of 5 and a rear setback of 8.
Yeah. So
and then it's silent on the dwelling.
I would just like to make the side setback 10, and the rear, I mean, meaning there's not a property behind you, correct? I guess I would just say the rear staying 8 is fine with me, but the side being 10, and then the 50 foot from a dwelling.
And Councilor Bacon, I see your hand up.
Yes, so my question is to legal. If we set the side and the rear at X number, if there is a special consideration under the special permit process, would we have the opportunity to, as a condition, make them larger if there was a unique circumstance, or will we be stuck with whatever we pass, Crystal?
It's a good question.
I mean, generally we don't change setbacks, because how would you do that without being arbitrary about it? I mean, you'd really have to do it case by case. And then the other issue here is who's going out to measure them.
Well, so the thing is, this is going to be case by case, because what we're doing is moving a use that is usually on 1 to 5+ acres to a lot size that is minimal in comparison. So what I'm trying to figure out is if we left the accessory buffers, if you will, smaller, if there was a circumstance under which that was problematic, would we, under the special permit, be able to amend that in that special instance, as we do for other special permits? Or because of the nature of this zoning reg, would we have to stick by whatever numbers we put in it?
Off the top of my head, I'm wondering if they would have to get a dimensional variance, like they would have to get a special permit for their special permit. I mean,
to go less than, I think, but I think to create more.
Right.
Yeah, no, I get what you were trying to say. You're talking about if somebody needed, only a 2 foot instead of a 5 foot setback.
No, the other. I'm trying to say, if we say 5 and 8 as the current accessory is, if there's a circumstance under which it is going to be impinging on the dwelling, can we increase it? I'm asking the opposite question.
Oh, I don't think I've ever heard of that. Normally it's the other way around, that they can't meet the minimums, so we stretch them.
Right. I'm trying to address Councilor Murphy's concern to see if we have the flexibility that if we needed the 50 feet, we could say it, but if we don't and everything's fine, we wouldn't make it that large in the zoning language.
I mean, you really would want to set your minimums and just kind of be left at that. And it should be just across the board. I've never seen it go the other way, where you would make a specific person have to meet a more strict requirement than somebody else. You would generally go the opposite, where you would broaden the requirement.
Okay, then to Councilor Murphy's point, if he wants the buffer larger, we have to make it so in the zoning. Okay, thank you.
Right.
I'll second your motion, Terry.
Thank you.
So let me just make sure I understand what you're saying. So you, Councilor Murphy, you're advocating for 10 feet, 15 feet, 10 feet from the side, 15 feet from the rear, and 50 feet.
No, 10 feet from the side. I'm staying with the 8 foot rear and 50 feet from the dwelling. And after hearing from Crystal, it would seem to me in situations where the 50 feet from the dwelling might not work, if neighbors were okay, then we would be in a position to lower that, or somebody would be in a position to say, okay, this particular case, because the neighbor that is 40 feet away is fine with it, but the 50 would be the criteria, but we could go lower, but not higher. Right, Crystal?
No, not at all. Because that's the point that she was making about the variance to a special permit for variance of use for your special permit. So you want to keep the buffers as least restrictive as possible, and then you could, say it's not going to work here, and then condition it further. But you cannot. You would have to go through a whole nother process to go through to get them more relaxed.
I interpret.
No, the opposite.
So if
we have Crystal restate.
Yeah, so if you set your buffers, we'll make it easy. If you set your buffers to the side at 5 feet and to the back at 10 feet, and this has to be 10 feet from a dwelling. So now you've got 10, 10, 5, and 5. But say somebody doesn't have a lot that is 20 feet back, they have 20 feet of backyard from their dwelling, so they wouldn't meet those requirements. They would have to get a variance to then meet something outside of what the minimum requirements are, because they would not be able to put a coop in 10 feet from the building and 10 feet from their back lot line. Say they could only do it 5 feet from their building and 5 feet from the back lot line. They would have to get a variance then from city council that says, I don't have enough space. Can I still do it? And it's a public hearing process. Your neighbors would have to say, okay, it's fine by me, because I don't know, maybe your side setbacks are still fine. There's nobody behind them, whatever the case may be. They'd have to get a variance to go outside of those minimum requirements.
It's the minimum requirements. So we
wouldn't then say,
right, but we also can't go up, because then we're not them equitably. So
you wouldn't go to someone and say, okay, our minimums are 10 feet from the back of your house and 10 feet from your back lot line, but you have to get 20 feet from the back of your house and 20 feet from your back lot line. You wouldn't go the opposite direction.
Right, so whatever we pick is what it has to be.
Right. And then anybody who doesn't meet that, because inevitably you're going to have lots that just don't allow to have chickens. It happens. It's the same way, you know, you might not be able to put a garage where you want to put it. It just happens. You have to come in for a variance for that. So,
Okay.
So my thought is the 50 feet from dwelling is not necessarily that person's dwelling. It is any dwelling. So that, and I'm thinking primarily of the neighbors. I mean, I'm assuming person putting in there is probably not worried about from their own dwelling, but if we have a 10-foot side, I'm just looking at, if I had a 10-foot side with my neighbor, their coop would be about 25 feet from me.
Right.
And if they went farther down, they'd be 20 or 25 feet from my other neighbor. So that's what I'm saying. And that if we can do that, and then we know that if we got a unique situation, we could lower that. But I think to protect the potential of each neighbor property, that the 50 feet from their dwelling makes sense. And again, the egg song made me come up with the 50 feet after reading the Chicopee thing.
You know, given that I think most of our properties in Holyoke run longer than they do wider, you know, and I think it's typical. Like you have more of a backyard than you do a wide backyard, right? Your yard runs long from your house. You know, having a smaller side than the rear in terms of the setback makes sense. So, I mean, maybe it's 8 and 8 as the compromise, or
what's before us right now?
there's competing. So you either have 5 and 8, so 5 on the side, 8 on the rear, or Chicopee's is 10 on the side and 15 in the rear. And then
is 15, and I'm saying I'll amend that to be 10. So 10 on the side, 8 in the rear.
The motion that I seconded was 10, 15, 8. And 50.
We didn't. I
seconded his motion, and now we're discussing and maybe having amendments.
Yeah, I did make a motion.
And I seconded it. So now we may make amendments, but we haven't yet.
So what I hear Councilor Murphy's motion then is, I thought we were just sort of, you know, hashing out what the numbers were. So I hear you making a motion, 10 on the side, 10 from the rear. Is that correct?
I believe that's what I proposed, and then I was okay if it went back to 8, and then 50 from any dwelling.
Okay, so I guess what I'm saying is, because our properties run longer, if we're going to have the same sort of harmony that both the accessory use and the Chicopee setbacks have, it's smaller on the side, slightly larger on the rear. So like 8 and 10. 8 on the side, 10 in the rear would be, you know, sort of like the compromise between the accessory use sort of setbacks and then the Chicopee setbacks.
And then 50 for the dwelling.
50, I'm gonna say that also sounds, I mean, so if you have your entire yard, I'm not sure do you know how long your yard is?
Well, I have probably a half acre.
So you have,
but then I have a house behind me with a little long. But so if my neighbor to my left, who goes down to the river, very long backyard. So if I made it 10 feet from the rear, they'd be basically in the river, or almost in the river. If I made it 8 feet from the side, they're very close to my walkway. If I made it 50, that's 15. But then for the 50-foot dwelling, because of the rear, and this is where your rear, I'm gonna watch how I say this. The comments about the rear, don't get me in trouble now. The comments about the rear make sense, because if in fact there's no properties on the side and it's a long back, they would easily make the 50-foot for the dwelling. So that's where I'm more comfortable. To me, that's the most important part, is being away from the dwelling. But obviously, again, if it's a very narrow area and the side is, you know, if you're not going into the rear, and I know all of this is in the rear yard, correct? I think I've read that several times, and I think everything else I saw was everybody had rear yards.
Yep.
So with that in mind, that would be away from their dwelling, but it would also be away from their neighboring dwellings, unless there happened to be like in my case, a neighboring house behind me.
Great. So
That's why, and I'd be okay 8, 10, and then to 50.
great. And so if I think about, so it's very easy to get 50 away from your neighbor because you have their whole backyard connected to your yard, and then you place your coop somewhere in your yard. I think it's very easy to get to your neighbor's 50, to get away from your neighbor from 50 feet.
Yep.
But does that give you enough space in your lot? Like, let's say we had two 50-foot lots back to back, the backyards touch, right? So it's easy to get 50 feet away from your neighbor, but then do you have the 50 feet that you need from your own house, even though it's in your backyard? That's why maybe it's a neighboring dwelling, 50 feet from any neighboring dwelling and not your own dwelling. Because I think getting 50 feet away from your own dwelling.
I'd be okay with that, because my concern is the neighbor's dwellings. I'd be okay with that.
Okay, so then we are at.
So I'll for an amendment to.
Let me just make sure I have this right first. 8 from the side, 10 from the rear, and 50 foot from neighboring dwelling. Okay, now go ahead, Linda. Go ahead.
No, I was going to offer that as an amendment to his motion, but you already did it.
Okay. This is the sausage making, folks. Okay, so on the motion then that we create setbacks at 8 feet from the side, 10 feet from the rear, and 50 feet from any neighboring dwelling. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So that's a 5-0 vote. If I am incorrect, you can correct me.
I said aye.
We gotcha.
I'm just gonna check my email notes to myself to make sure that was the only sort of outstanding issue. I think we hit all 3 of them. Yep, the other issue was about the days of notification, but I think we settled that with the special permit by the city council and the public hearing process. And that looks like it's good. All right, Councilor Murphy and Councilor Beacon, are your hands still up to comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's a leftover.
That's okay, just want to make sure, because it seems like we're squared away here.
A couple more questions if I can.
Go ahead, absolutely.
Okay. So, and again, I'm trying to learn. So one of the things that it talked about was lighting for 14 to 16 hours. Now, are there, I mean, again, I don't, and I never could find anything what kind of lighting this is in literature, but I mean, that would be another issue, or that can we get some kind of control, and when are those, if they have to have lighting for 14 to 16 hours, is there a way that we can control those 14? I mean, I'm just saying, I don't know how bright those lights are, and Libby or Juan, I don't know if anybody knows. But I mean, if it's bright, then obviously that again could be creating a nuisance in terms of that light. And I don't know if they are. I mean, it's very minimal lighting, but I know it said 14 to 16 hours. So
They're generally inside the coop. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut.
No, go ahead. If you want to respond, that's fine.
They're usually generally inside the coop. They're contained. They're not outside lights. They go inside the coop.
And can I add something?
Yep.
Chair,
Go ahead,
Madam
Councilor
Chair?
Hernandez.
Okay. So the lighting, the most important thing I think, and we can confirm it with our Board of Health Director, is the heating that they need in the winter, to put some heating in there. Lighting is more like a choice, I believe, so they can lay more eggs during the winter when there's less light. But you don't have to put light. And then of course, when the season changes, they'll start laying more eggs. So that's what I understand with the lighting. But the heating is the one, because you have to maintain the water that it doesn't freeze.
Right.
And I don't know if Sean would like to clarify if I said anything incorrectly.
Oh, sorry.
But I do, if I can, just to answer Libby, and that's exactly what I had seen, that the lighting was crucial for healthy eggs. And so that's why I brought that up.
Go ahead, Mr. Gonzalez.
So Eric and I had sort of discussed this at length in the earlier part of the process. I will say that in the ordinance as it is currently submitted under D, general regulations, it says heaters within the hen house are strictly prohibited. So it does say that you can't have heaters. Light is required for egg production, and the lighting will ensure that these hens are actually laying eggs more regularly. We put in our regulations a section that says that any electrical installation has to be in accordance with building and electrical code. So we don't lay out what you can do with lighting. We simply lay out that if you do put lighting in, it has to meet the state codes for, like, you know, the safety of the wiring and how it's installed. They do make some lights that give off heat. They're not heaters as in an open element. They're like a bulb that can provide a little warmth inside. Yeah, a heat lamp, exactly. Yeah, and so that is a possibility. I don't know if that technically crosses the heaters are strictly prohibited section. And maybe we want to clarify that language a little more, that maybe an open element heater is not allowed, but heat lamps are.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to motion that we make that change to make the regulation more clear. So it was section D, and do you have the section in front of you, Sean? I caught the D, and
yeah, so it's D. It's under general regulations, and it's item 3 under D of the ordinance.
I see. Yeah. So 3. So D, general regulations, item number 3, heaters with open element. Is that what it is? Open element heaters? Open element heaters within the hen house are strictly prohibited. So we're just changing that language to say open element. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 5-0 for that specificity. I think that from what I understand, light is required to make the hens lay more productively, but they're not required. It's just to help the hens keep up with the level of production. But if they make fewer eggs in the winter, I don't think that it's a matter of choice at that point in time. Any other outstanding issues, questions, concerns? Sean, is your hand up to issue some other sort of notes or guidance? Okay.
No, sorry.
That's fine. We did a lot here. I do thank you all for going through the hard work of sort of negotiating all these differences of opinions. It's really sort of amazing and productive and extremely time consuming. So thank you all for that. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different amendments. It's the special permit, the downtown, the residential zones, the special permit, the residential zones, the setback requirements, and the heating element are the 4 amendments we made this evening.
One more time. I hate to keep, I wrote myself a lot of notes here. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm doing the same thing.
So in the ordinance where it was under hens, and I got myself a little note here to define outdoor space, because it says run shall mean the enclosed outdoor space for hens.
Yes.
So there, it's really within, it's not going outdoors, correct?
No, because it says under specifics, specifications and dimensions. Let me see. It's so section 2 hens, under C specifications and dimensions. It defines a run. A run shall be size at a minimum of 10 square feet per hen and secured to surround and secured surround of chicken wire or, sorry, and secured, it should be saying secured surround, is that right? A run shall be sized at a minimum of 10 square feet per hen and secured surround, it should be a secured, I see where it is, an a secured surround of chicken wire or more durable material at a height of 5 feet tall with a roof or 6 feet tall without a roof.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, so this is what brought me to that, because I noticed the hen house was an enclosed structure with nothing mentioned, and the other one was an enclosed outdoor structure. So that's why I mean, again, the hen house is outdoors, correct?
Yeah, but it's enclosed. It's where the hens actually live and nest, whereas the run is where they run in and out outside from the coop. So they should be attached, and the run surrounds the hen house.
So when you say it surrounds it, it's in a circle?
It could be any shape.
Mm-hmm.
Any
It could
shape
be
around the hen house. It would sort of connect to or surround it and create 10 feet of space for each hen within that space on top of the hen house.
Okay, my last question, I promise. So, so from the hen house, how does that hen get to the runner?
It's connected.
Do you have an entrance?
Connected.
It's connected, like a corridor like that, and it connects to the thing.
Or
So
the run can completely envelop the coop and surround it. But you could imagine that a doghouse, just for a point of reference, and from the front of the doghouse, you would have a chicken wire area that is defined for them to run out of that house and have space to roam and feed and get some exercise. It doesn't have to have a top, but if it doesn't have a top, it has to be higher than runs that do.
Okay, so each hen has access to the run whenever their owner is willing to let them, and they don't have to.
They could go in and out as they please.
All
They
the
could
time.
Oh, they can. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why there's an enclosed area. So I drew a picture. Does it come through? So there would be the
I
hen
like that
house.
one.
Oh, okay.
Hen house, and there's a door that lets the chickens go in and out of the hen house as they want. And then there's the enclosure. The run is created by the enclosure of space either connected to or surrounding the hen house. And so the chickens can run in and out of the house into the run, but not further than that.
Okay. You're like
Wow.
artist.
I like yours, Lisi. It's nice and round. Mine was like straight, like a tunnel.
Oh, you drew one too. Okay. Councilor Murphy, does that make it clear?
More clear. I'll check one out, but I'm more clear. I'm more comfortable. I just was trying to figure out how to get out of there.
We're gonna build one together, Councilor Murphy.
Oh, I don't know.
Me and you will build one together.
Okay, then. So on adopting there's 4 pieces of paper that we're adopting here. One is the ordinance with the 4 amendments that we just went through. 2 is the zoning regulations, the zoning ordinance with the amendments that we passed. 3 is the Board of Health regulations, and 4 is the Board of Health application. And just as a side note, those Board of Health regulations and application would also be required to be approved by the Board of Health Commission.
Okay, I was wondering if those were under our jurisdiction.
Well, I think we are sort of saying we understand these are the documents that would be presented, and we like them and understand them, and they comport with our ordinances.
But ultimately, when the council approves a permit, that permit then goes to the Board of Health to administer the permit, correct?
Yes, okay. And that's why we want to have a sense of what the regulations are.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so then can we vote on these documents as a package then, or do you want separate votes?
I think a package is fine.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so then on the motion to adopt all 4 of these documents as amended, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. I believe that's a 5-0 vote. Thank you all.
Thank you.
So we're gonna,
Make a motion to adjourn.
Wait. Council Murphy wanted to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry.
we're gonna get all these amended documents back again before are we taking it?
It should be taken up next Tuesday
Okay.
in full council, and I'll work with Crystal to make sure that the final legal language reflects the changes that we spoke of this evening, but I'm sure she
And I
has.
know Crystal's busy, but if it's all possible to get it maybe by Sunday, sorry, Crystal, but Monday the latest, just so I know a couple of times I get things and I just haven't got time to even proofread what's there, so.
So to the chair, if that is putting too much on Crystal, we do need time to review them before the city council meeting.
We're all set. We're gonna have them out Friday because we have to submit
Okay.
it Friday at noon. So I just need to touch base with Councilor Lisi, make sure that I redlined documents while we were talking, but I need to make sure it matches what she has.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So we are all set. There was a motion to adjourn.
Second it.
A motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All so moved. So enjoy the evening, what's left of it all, and we'll see you
And I
next
want to compliment you all on the compromise.
Tuesday. It was good work. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.